The legendary black-haired Grand Duke of the North stood amidst frost and berries, a man so cold he might as well use liquid nitrogen as cologne. In a quiet moment, a little black-haired boy looked up to ask about the notoriously cold Grand Duke. A pink-haired woman closed her book, smiling gently as she told the boy he was basically looking at his own frosty future. The black-haired boy wasn't buying it, wondering why anyone would choose a life of permanent brin frise. She laughed cheerfully among the flowers, making the prospect of becoming a stern ice king sound like a spring picnic. The scene shifts to a nursery, where a pink-haired baby reached a tiny hand out of her cradle with a small, hopeful wah. A dark memory of a fatal car crash flashed by, proving that not even a tragic backstory can stop a reincarnation plot. Waking up as a baby in a fantasy world full of flowers is an extremely cliché setup, but hey, at least the rent is free. A blonde woman held her new pink-haired bundle of joy, proving that the afterlife comes with excellent skin-to-skin contact. A brown-haired maid burst in to ruin the mood, scolding the blonde woman for neglecting the mysterious young master. The blonde woman, Judy, stood her ground, reminding the help that even wet nurses have their own babies to hold. As the maid stormed out with a loud bang, she warned Judy to get back before the Grand Duke decided to enforce some house rules. The pink-haired baby wondered if she was a secret princess or just a commoner waiting for a dramatic reveal. Plot twist, Judy decided to bring her baby to work, warning her little daughter to keep the fussing to a minimum in the nursery. The pink-haired baby gave a firm nod, vowing internally not to cry, because being a fussy infant was just too much work. A soft, worried Abu escaped her lips as she prepared for her first official royal meeting in this strange new world. They entered a desolate and empty hallway that looked like it was designed by a professional haunted house architect. Looking out the window, the sky was dumping snow, as if trying to set a world record for miserable weather. A massive, cold castle loomed in the distance, a perfect match for the Grand Duke's reputation as a human refrigerator. Her breath hitched with a soft ha as she caught her first glimpse of the legendary man. There he was, the black-haired Grand Duke of the North, looking like he hadn't smiled since the dawn of time. Meanwhile, the Sun Prince stood by in all his golden glory, serving as the perfect shiny rival to our dark Grand Duke. The Grand Duke's life was a bloody mess of monster hunting and zero socializing, basically the ultimate introverted warrior's dream. Judy nervously asked what was wrong, probably hoping the Grand Duke wouldn't banish them to the nearest snowdrift for breathing his air. The Grand Duke noticed the baby's fearless gaze, and she realized she might have accidentally challenged him to a staring contest. She decided his glare was only intimidating on paper, treating him like a fictional character to avoid a full-blown baby meltdown. The Grand Duke delivered a cold lecture on etiquette, reminding Judy that even saying his name was a major social faux pas. He walked into the shadows, dropping the room temperature by several degrees, leaving everyone to wonder if he ever blinked. The baby's mind raced as she realized there had to be more to the story. It turned out Judy had left her post for her own child, yet the Grand Duke still hired her as a wet nurse. To protect her mom, the baby let out a fierce mamaboo, which was about as threatening as a basket of fluffy kittens. She quickly realized her attempt at intimidation was a total failure, since her most dangerous weapon was her cuteness. The Grand Duke continued his dramatic exit, probably off to sit in a dark room and think cold thoughts. The baby sucked her thumb, deciding that royal politics were way more complicated than figuring out how to crawl. She started getting excited about the Grand Duke's son, anticipating a mini heartthrob with world-class brooding genes. In her mind, she was already picturing a gentle, beautiful boy, clearly having spent too much time on romance. Webto on Eps. Judy noticed a draft and found a window open, proving that even castle staff slacked off. Shivering in the cold, Judy worried the young master would turn into a popsicle before he found a blanket. The baby looked around, wondering if this medieval fantasy world had invented thermostats or basic floor heating. They finally entered the young master's room, which was so luxurious it made their previous quarters looked like a closet. Even a barren northern castle was decked out in gold and flowers, which is exactly why everyone loves fantasy worlds. A sharp wah erupted from the cradle as the black-haired baby woke up and chose violence against everyone's eardrums. The pink-haired baby was unimpressed, judging the future Grand Duke's weak cries like a seasoned toddler pageant judge. Judy gasped, discovering the poor kid's cheeks were practically frozen, which was certainly one way to keep a baby quiet. The pink-haired baby's heart raced as she excitedly leaned in to see if the young master lived up to the hype. When she finally came face to face with her new, very loud, and blue-eyed roommate, she let out a tiny, dramatic gasp. The black-haired baby stared back at her with teary eyes, looking like a miniature version of the Grand Duke, but with much better lung capacity. It was love at first sight, or at least extreme admiration, as the pink-haired baby started drooling over the sheer cuteness. Judy held the cold baby close to provide some much-needed warmth, while the pink-haired baby watched the tender moment in awe. The black-haired baby finally warmed up and let out a cheerful Kaya, officially winning over his little pink-haired fan. With a thunderous bang, the pink-haired baby's dramatic entrance was cut short by her own suddenly wide eyes. Judy beamed while holding little Setsu, who let out a happy chia, officially becoming the cutest heir in history. The pink-haired baby's face flushed with pure adoration, proving that even as an infant, she was a total sucker for a pretty face. Little Setsu crawled determinedly toward his favorite person, while Manelli greeted him with a cheerful biboo. On the other side of the rug, Manelli was completely captivated by the young master's affectionate advance, her eyes sparkling like she'd just won the baby lottery. Judy smiled gently, narrating the big reveal. This adorable black-haired fluffball was in fact Setsu Alchemon, the Grand Duke's official heir. The two little roommates sat together in peaceful baby bliss, completely unaware of the dramatic fantasy tropes awaiting them. A sudden heavy thud caught Manelli off guard, leaving her half surprised, wondering if the plot was progressing or if someone had just dropped a pacifier. A romantic vision flashed by, depicting a tragic love story, a blonde woman in love with a weak and timid Grand Duke Setsu. Little Setsu stared with big, innocent blue eyes, looking far too precious to ever grow into a cold, brooding northern ruler. Looking at his little face, Manelli felt a pang in her heart stronger than anything she'd read in a novel, proving that real-life cuteness was dangerous. A somber memory revealed a man failing to protect Canaria, set against a backdrop of shattered glass and a heavy, tragic backstory. Little Setsu broke into a brilliant smile, one that could melt the entire northern glacier in an afternoon. Manelli found herself completely smitten, her little heart officially captured by the sheer force of his baby face charm. She made a solemn vow to raise Setsu into the perfect black-haired Grand Duke, because every romance novel needs a glow-up. Amidst a shower of petals, she dedicated herself to ensuring he got his happy ending with the female lead, playing the role of the ultimate long-term wingwoman. Time flew by, and Manelli grew into a girl with brilliant pink curls, looking every bit the main character in her purple dress. She wore a confident smile, clearly enjoying her life as the young master's most trusted and fashionable companion. Setsu had also leveled up, transforming into a handsome young boy with sharp blue eyes and major future male lead vibes. Manelli continued to radiate main character energy, her pink hair and bows proving that growing up suited her well. Framed by flowers, the young master Setsu looked like a masterpiece, finally living up to his destiny as a mini heartthrob. The two bickered over their slight age difference, with Manelli using New Year's logic to claim the official title of older sister. Setsu blushed and let out a flustered sigh, clearly losing the argument against his persistent, curly-haired friend. A sudden echoed as Manelli clutched her chest dramatically, a victim of the young master's cuteness overload. Setsu played the gentleman, offering to blow on her heart to make it feel better, completely oblivious to how smooth that line was. Cupid's arrow struck again, and Manelli literally spurted blood at the sheer cuteness of his innocent offer. She couldn't help but plant a kiss on his cheek, shouting Setsu's name in celebration of him being the cutest boy in the cold north. The court maids gossiped at the breach of etiquette, wondering if the pink-haired girl realized she was being too casual with royalty. An older maid, clarified that Manelli was the young master's official playmate, effectively shutting down the judgment with the fact of her high status. They discussed how the once fussy Setsu would only smile and stop crying when his favorite pink-haired companion was around. Manelli reflected on her efforts as an older sister since birth, basically serving as a toddler-sized bodyguard and nanny. A flashback showed Setsu's insistence on eating the same food, wearing the same clothes, and even staying in the same room as Manelli since they were babies. She took pride in having changed his novel canon fate of being sickly and short-lived, ensuring they both grew up healthy through the power of friendship and snacks. Setsu tilted his head with a confused question mark, wondering why his best friend was now lost in thought. He asked about the meaning of the good luck charm, and she sweetly explained that he represented all the good fortune in her life. The young master looked genuinely touched, his blue eyes widening as the weight of her sweet words finally sank in. He hugged her back, declaring that Manelli was his good luck charm too, and that having her made him the happiest boy in the world. As they snuggled, Manelli decided she had won at life, successfully locking down the cutest future in the world. Setsu praised her pink hair, comparing it to candy and rabbits, while Manelli wondered where on earth he'd ever seen pink sugar. She laughed off his pink candy comment, questioning where such a high-class, sweet treat would even exist in their world. Setsu spilled the beans about Loki's secret Easter stash, mentioning pink sugar for a special holiday rabbit project. Manelli was stunned, realizing that in the snowy north, sugar was basically worth its weight in gold, especially the rare pink kind. Despite his protests that it was a secret, she dragged him toward the forbidden candy stash, proving she was the ringleader of this tiny rebellion. Setsu stopped short, his eyes locking on something mysterious and out of place in the hallway. Manelli turned with a curious question mark, sensing the shift in atmosphere and wondering what had ruined their sugar-hunting mood. Her eyes widened in genuine shock when she saw the massive trouble currently looming over their secret mission. A soft escaped her lips as she realized they were caught and they were in big trouble. The two children froze in the darkness, overshadowed by the tall, ominous silhouette of the Grand Duke himself. A narration box detailed the Grand Duke's tragic history. Orphaned at a young age, guardian of a desolate land, and having lost his wife during childbirth. Manelli analyzed the Grand Duke's emotional deficit, realizing he was actively avoiding every blessing life threw at him. Manelli clenched her fists, vowing to fix this dysfunctional family tree, because professional meddling was apparently her calling as a toddler. The approaching Grand Duke cornered them in the hallway, forcing Manelli to pivot to a lie about sugar for the sake of immediate survival. She turned on the innocent charm, lying that she didn't care with a smile that screamed, "I'm definitely up to something." Nellie worried she was being a bit too haughty for a commoner, while Setsu looked like he'd just lost his favorite pacifier. The Grand Duke swept away with a dramatic cape swish, leaving the children standing in his cold, emotionally distant wake. Setsu stared at his father's back with a look of pure, concentrated rejection that could break a heart of stone. That was the last straw. Manelli's face twisted into a scowl that could peel paint off the castle walls as she, at the risk of dungeon time, roared at the Grand Duke, demanding he show even an ounce of interest in his son's preferences. The little pink-haired canon continued her verbal assault, accusing the Grand Duke of being the world's most silent, brooding parent. The Grand Duke kept walking as if deaf to the complaints of commoners, leaving Manelli fuming at his complete lack of parental vibes. Setsu stared at his fearless friend in utter shock, probably wondering if she was a curly-haired member of the Suicide Squad. Manelli reflected on the Grand Duke's odd habit of only acknowledging her, effectively ignoring his own air in his presence. She stared down the hallway with a look of cold determination, officially declaring war on the Grand Duke's terrible communication skills. Both children gasped as they realized the Grand Duke was really just going to walk away from that tirade. With the heavy, rhythmic thump of the Grand Duke's departure, Manelli tried one last desperate shout to get his attention. She yelled in frustration that he should at least be surprised by her blatant disrespect, but the man remained unfazed. Manelli threw a tantrum over the Grand Duke's coldness while Setsu desperately tried to stop her from having a full meltdown. Seeing her friend's sad face, she realized the emotional damage was real and switched from rage mode to sympathy mode. Setsu broke into a brilliant smile, admitting that seeing her get angry for him was actually the highlight of his week. Manelli wiped away her frustrated tears, exhausted by a man who refused to speak the universal language of not being a jerk. Setsu blushed furiously, his heart clearly doing a happy dance now that he finally had someone willing to fight for him. The young master looked at her with stars in his eyes, officially promoting her from nanny to soulmate. Manelli called out to him softly, her heart melting as she realized her older sister mission was going a little too well. She lunged in for a hug, blaming it all on the Grand Duke's poor life choices while Setsu did his best to keep the peace. Setsu hugged her back, whispering that she was his ultimate good luck charm, basically sealing their fate in romance noveling. She smiled in satisfaction, feeling her raising a heartthrob strategy was working, even if her pupil was becoming dangerously charming at an alarming rate. Manelli cupped his cheeks with a tenderness that proved she was definitely the female lead of this northern soap opera. Surrounded by flowers, she made a sacred vow. No one would hate him, not even his emotionally stunted father. Setsu gave a smile, so pure it was practically a health hazard, clearly ready to believe anything Manelli said. Manelli looked like a literal angel among the flowers, basking in the success of her Save the Young Master operation. She held him tight, internally screaming that he was the prettiest, most gentle boy in the entire world. A memory of baby Manelli revealed her lifelong commitment to be the loudest, pinkest presence in Alchemon Castle. The two toddlers sat among the lilies, a portrait of friendship too precious for words. Manelli called his name with a brilliant smile, her pink curls bouncing with the sheer energy of a girl who was winning. Setsu looked stunned as Manelli joked about his no-sugar rule, acting like she was the highest authority on castle nutrition. She winked and wagged her finger, declaring today a special sugar is allowed festival because she was making the rules now. Setsu was completely mesmerized, looking at her as if she had just invented fire, sugar, and the concept of fun all at once. Manelli noticed his intense stare and asked what was wrong, completely unaware she had just landed a critical hit of cuteness. The young master looked back at her with an expression so soft and adoring it should have come with a warning label. He burst into a laugh as brilliant as a blooming flower, looking every bit the world-class heartthrob he was destined to become. Game-style one-hit and two-hit pop-ups confirmed Manelli was taking massive emotional damage from Setsu's pure cuteness. With a critical hit landed, she let out a pained "ugh" and clutched her heart dramatically, leaving Setsu looking bewildered. She gasped and begged him to turn around, needing a moment to recover from his weaponized good looks. Setsu giggled to himself, concluding his best friend was preciously weird, which was a polite way of saying adorable weirdo. He narrowed his eyes with a secret smirk, realizing his father had done one thing right by bringing her home. A long, sharp creak filled the air as the children snuck into the dark and silent castle kitchen. Manelli put a finger to her lips to signal stealth mode, while Setsu followed behind her like a well-trained puppy. Their mission was cut short when a large hand suddenly yanked Manelli up by the collar like a mischievous kitten. A bearded, scarred man roared at them, catching the little thief red-handed in his domain. Before she could reach the sugar, the scarred chef held Manelli up by the collar like a naughty kitten, while Setsu watched with wide, shocked eyes. The chef roared at her about her food-stealing habits, threatening to teach the little pink-haired menace some much-needed kitchen etiquette. Manelli thought fast, pointing to the young master and reminding the angry man that she was in the presence of someone with extremely high status. With a sudden thwack, the chef dropped Manelli, instantly panicking over his unintentional offense to royalty. Setsu calmly explained he wanted cocoa, while Manelli let out a triumphant huff, clearly enjoying her little get-out-of-jail-free noble card. The chef performed an Olympic-level 180, bowing and scraping as he insisted the young master was free to roam the castle as he pleased. Manelli stared in disbelief at the chef's instant personality shift, crossing her arms at his blatant and shameless favoritism. The chef got defensive, lecturing Manelli on the vast social gap between her and the future Grand Duke of the North. They bickered over her infuriating personality, which she proudly declared was a gift inherited from her equally stubborn father. With a chilling creak, a sudden cold swept over Manelli, making the hairs on her arms stand up. She whipped around, wondering why the atmosphere had suddenly plunged into the uncanny valley of awkward tension. illusion. Setsu broke into a smile so brilliant it came with its own backlighting, looking like the most precious angel in the world. Manelli was caught off guard by his sudden warmth, questioning why he'd been acting like a miniature ice cube just moments before. She laughed off the chef's nervousness, mockingly questioning who would ever want to be friends with such a scary Scotsman. A rhythmic trembling sound started as the chef shook with fear, desperately denying any friendship with a little pink-haired canon. Manelli innocently asked if the chef's odd behavior was because he'd accidentally taken the wrong constipation medicine, delivering a savage burn. Utterly defeated, the chef retreated into the shadows, muttering about making cocoa just to escape her relentless verbal assault. Out in the fresh snow, Manelli celebrated her cocoa victory in the pleasant weather with her favorite young master. She credited her luxurious life to Setsu, looking up at the towering, snow-dusted castle walls with a contented smile. Setsu radiated happiness, as if surrounded by a field of imaginary flowers, basking in her sweet words of gratitude. Their walk was interrupted by a brown-haired boy in earmuffs, who greeted them on the snowy garden path. The new boy, Lin, greeted them with a bright, friendly smile that could rival the northern dawn. Manelli ran up to him, immediately interrogating him about the giant gardening shears hanging from his diligent little waist. Lin explained he was helping with garden chores, winning Manelli over with his diligent and helpful good boy aura. Framed by a halo of flowers, Lin looked like the perfect boy next door straight out of a heartwarming storybook. Manelli was so impressed, she mentally added Lin to her short list of potential future husbands. Just in case. Lin insisted the hard garden work was nothing, while Setsu watched silently from the background, growing quieter by the second. Setsu's blue eyes narrowed slightly as he asked about their relationship, clearly wondering why they seemed so suspiciously close. Manelli explained that Lin was the son of the captain of the guard, destined to become a legendary knight and protector of the realm. An awkward silence hung between the three of them as the two boys faced off in the snowy courtyard. Manelli apologized for Setsu's social anxiety, assuming he was just too shy to handle a cool new friend like Lin. Lin frantically waved it off politely, insisting it was totally fine and he didn't mind at all. The brown-haired boy bowed and left, leaving the children alone again in the quiet, frozen garden. Manelli gushed about how interesting Lin was, completely oblivious to the fact that she was stepping on a jealous landmine in Setsu's heart. She continued her internal monologue about loyalty, while Setsu looked like he was contemplating turning Lin into a permanent ice sculpture. A narrative flashback revealed Lin's future as Setsu's most loyal knight commander, protecting the sickly Grand Duke with his life. Manelli hyped up Lin's future swordsmanship, predicting his skills and legendary knight vibes would surpass even his famous father. Setsu looked increasingly distressed as she listed Lin's good points, clearly not a fan of this competition for his best friend's attention. Manelli's heart skipped a beat as she realized Setsu was actually jealous, finding his possessive little face ridiculously cute. In a flash of insight, she realized the sheer power of Setsu's cuteness was her ultimate secret weapon. Setsu blushed furiously, asking if she'd like him more if he acted like the kind and cheerful Lin. He gazed at her with a look of pure, soul-piercing vulnerability that could make a stone statue weep with joy. Manelli finally reached her limit for how cute one boy could be and burst out with a happy Kaya. With a soft squish, she grabbed his face, unable to resist his perfectly soft and pinchable cheeks. She marveled at his matcha-like skin, declaring that absolutely no one could hate a boy as pretty as him. Her eyes lit up with a sudden, mischievous idea, having just designed the ultimate character arc for her little protege. She demanded that he grow up to be the classic cold, straightforward Northern Grand Duke, because that's what the readers crave. Setsu tilted his head in confusion, wondering why he needed to be cold when he felt so warm right now. Manelli did a happy dance to celebrate her own genius, already imagining the world-class heartthrob her raising strategy would eventually create. Manelli recovered from the cuteness overload, admitting that imagining Setsu as a dangerously handsome adult was already making her dizzy. The pink-haired girl confessed she wasn't interested in saving the masses. Her protection services were currently exclusive to one person. Manelli aggressively drilled Setsu on the aesthetic of the cold Northern Grand Duke, insisting he must love his territory as much as he loved himself. Setsu was clearly confused by her routine, but promised he'd try his best, simply because Minelli was there. Full of pink energy, she swore she'd stay by his side until he finally found happiness, which was basically forever. Setsu hit her with a small, jealous reality check, pointing out that she seemed to have a thing for the cheerful Lin. Minelli brushed off the jealousy, lost in the idea of Setsu growing into the perfect, charming, cool, and collected northern ruler. A dramatic silhouette hinted at the future. Setsu, cold to the world, but vulnerable only to his one person. Setsu watched silently as Minelli got lost in her Grand Duke training fantasy, looking completely unfazed by her fervor. The training session ended with a nap as Minelli conked out on her sketchbook, snoring amidst her messy charcoal masterpiece. Setsu leaned in with a smirk, delivering the ultimate finishing blow by telling her she was actually terrible at drawing. He critiqued her portrait of the Great Duke of the North, pointing out that it was basically just a giant, gloomy black scribble with a sword. Dead to the world, Minelli was completely unaware of the stylish charcoal smudge now decorating her pink cheek. His expression softened into pure adoration, finding her messy, sleeping face more captivating than any professional art. In a flowery vision, a mature, smiling version of Minelli embodied the pure radiance that had completely captured the young master. Setsu wondered how someone so bright could exist in his cold world. Under the weight of her own destiny, she let out a sleepy image as she rolled over, proving she was more of an adorable toddler than a legendary dreamer. Setsu smiled gently again, clearly accepting his fate as the personal guardian of this pink-haired, charcoal-faced disaster. A gentle hand stroked Minelli's hair as she dreamed of her next big plan, her pink curls framing her peaceful face. The atmosphere shifted as the real Grand Duke appeared, looking tall, grim, and intimidating. The Father of the Year candidate arrives with rhythmic footsteps as Duke proclaims he's only here to take the sleeping, pink-haired, heart-stealing cat. Setsu looks on in horror as his cold father scoops up Minelli, treating the girl like a sack of royal potatoes. Duke turns and coldly accuses Minelli's mother of using the child as a bargaining chip to extort the family. A dark and crackling energy surrounds Setsu as he yells at his father, demanding he leave the innocent mother and daughter alone. Ignoring his outburst, Duke simply looks down at the sleeping girl, oblivious to the family drama happening above her head. He challenges Setsu's fury, asking if the boy really intends to carry the heavy toddler by himself. Duke walks away with his prize, internally admitting he's just trying to show affection, albeit clumsily. He glances back, the mask of the cold Duke cracking just enough to show he's paying attention. Minelli wakes up in bed, rubbing her eyes and complaining that the morning sun is too aggressive. Her mother is startled by her own reflection in the mirror, presumably wondering how she got involved in this northern soap opera. Minelli gives her mom a hug, jokingly asking if a handsome man finally called her pretty today. Her mother stares into the distance, suddenly melancholic as she realizes how much time has passed. With a hopeful glint in her eye, Minelli asks if she's finally getting a dad, completely unaware she was just carried by one yesterday. The mother looks down at her daughter, her expression a mix of love and the weight of keeping secrets. Minelli dresses in a gorgeous purple gown, her mind racing with the possibilities of a legal family connection. She contemplates Duke's cold nature, surprised that such a stoic man knew how to compliment her mom. During bath time, her mother recalls impulsively running away from home due to a lack of trust and self-worth. Toddler Minelli splashes in the water, connecting the dots and asking if that's where her mother met her mysterious father. With a soft splash, her mother goes silent, her gaze distant, avoiding the difficult question. A snowy memory reveals a tender moment of Duke wiping away her mother's tears, offering silent comfort. Her mother stares at the flowers, bitterly realizing she understood his feelings for her too late. Among the lavender flowers, toddler Minelli listens as her mother wishes she'll never regret her life choices. Her mother looks surprised, perhaps startled by the pink-haired little fireball's intelligence and sharp insight. The moment ends in a warm, loving smile, deepening the bond that keeps them together in their northern exile. Minelli decides that becoming Setsu's legal sister is a brilliant move for her long-term goals. In pursuit of ultimate castle comfort, with a cheerful slam, she kicks open the door, loudly wishing her favorite young master a good morning. The serious, mustachioed butler immediately ruins the mood, lecturing her that barging into a royal bedroom is social suicide. Minelli is left speechless. A chibi Setsu then pops up, offering a surprisingly polite morning greeting. Setsu, ready to go in his heavy travel furs, announces he's being dragged on a dangerous northern ice wall expedition. The scene shifts to the frozen border, where the Alchemon family is conducting their biannual inspection of the literal ice wall. Setsu checks his new fluffy coat in the mirror, hoping his little bear look is stylish enough to impress Minelli. He blushes furiously when Minelli calls him cute, immediately deflecting the compliment back to the pink-haired girl. Minelli is ecstatic, while the butler stands in the background, looking like he desperately needs a vacation. The usually stoic young master lets out a rare, adorable giggle, proving he's completely weak to her praise. Setsu realizes Minelli is coatless and immediately orders the butler to fix this, as his best friend must not be cold. Minelli vehemently refuses the gift, insisting her castle life requires no extra outerwear. A chibi Minelli gives the butler a mischievous wink, who is now sweating bullets. Setsu pulls the ultimate kicked puppy face. Clearly heartbroken, she won't accept his foray into toddler fashion. Minelli's internal scam detector goes off the charts as she realizes just how expensive the lavish coat is. Setsu insists she take it, while the butler watches the world's most polite tug-of-war unfold in the hallway. A stunned Minelli stares at her friend, looking like she's been hit with a cuteness overload status ailment. Setsu doubles down on the charm, claiming she looks good in anything, causing Minelli's brain to short-circuit. Minelli laments the fate of Northern Dukes, who lose the female lead because they're too busy being legendary gift givers. Setsu warns of frostbite, while Minelli uses Northern Duke logic to dodge the gift. An ultimate battle of wits, hand-waving, and frantic refusal ensues as she tries to escape the coat, while the butler adjusts his monocle. With a sigh of relief, she hopes she didn't accidentally leak her secret meta-knowledge. Setsu gives her a firm, cold absolutely not, proving he's already mastered the art of being a blunt ruler. Confusion hangs in the air as Minelli stares at him, wondering why the room temperature suddenly dropped. With a dawning, Minelli connects the dots to the butler's suspicious omniscience. She realizes the butler is fully aware of the secret romance between her mother and the intimidating Duke. She blushes and giggles, thinking news in this northern soap opera travels faster than the winter flu. The mood turns dark and tense as a mysterious, shadowy voice demands to know what she meant by her earlier comments. Setsu summons the butler with a look of pure suspicion that would make a detective proud. A bright, flowery smile is Minelli's main defense against the growing tension in the cold northern household. She diffuses the tension with a laugh, promising to never leave his side for a moment, not realizing she's feeding a future obsession. An internal monologue reveals the butler's struggle between loyalty and the pressure of keeping the young master emotionally stable. The butler snaps back to duty, announcing an immediate visit to the tailor is required for the upcoming expedition. He looks serious and terrifying, warning that the consequences of lying to him are far worse than a missed nap. Setsu's inner shadow spirit manifests as a giant snake, proving he is absolutely not the boy you want to mess with. Morning light illuminates the castle windows as servants spread gossip about the Duke's overnight guest. When Minelli passes, the maids whisper about shameless behavior, already pegging her as the future Grand Duchess. She recalls a secret meeting from the original novel, realizing the current timeline is completely off the rails. Minelli worries things are progressing too quickly, especially with the negative reviews from the servants rolling in. With a confident slam, she kicks open the door to check on her favorite broody young master. Setsu is found sitting in a dark room, looking like he's auditioning for a gothic tragedy. With a worried patter of footsteps, Minelli asks if he woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Setsu yells at her to stay away, his face bright red, suggesting a major internal crisis. Minelli freezes, her brain struggling to process the sudden rejection. With a trembling voice, Setsu demands she leave, showing he is clearly not in the mood to play. She stands frozen in shock, her world turning purple with confusion as her best friend pushes her away. Panic sets in as she worries if the scandalous rumors have finally reached the one person who shouldn't have heard them. A divine illustration portrays Minelli as a literal sun, the only source of warmth in Setsu's cold existence. Setsu's inner thoughts are a mess of possessiveness, admitting he likes her and literally can't exist without her. A vision of toddler Minelli in a flower crown reinforces the idea that she should only ever look at him. A giant, inky black shadow monster looms behind Setsu, representing the shadow spirit tied to his family's bloodline. The Alchemist family crest is revealed to be the source of a monster contract, making the Grand Duke feared by all. The beast is a demon that feeds on human negativity, waiting for a heart to break so it could devour it. A cold block of text confirms Setsu's mother was actually sacrificed to the shadow spirit at his birth. The butler realizes Setsu has been suppressing a literal demon just to avoid scaring his favorite pink-haired playmate. He trembles in fear, knowing the demon will emerge if Minelli becomes untouchable as Setsu's sister. Setsu's inner shadow, Snake, hisses as he wonders if his father is already planning to remarry. Talk about daddy issues. With a nervous gulp, the butler sweats, presumably realizing his pension depends on this chaotic family. Minelli tries to digest the incoming gossip, realizing survival in this castle requires a master's degree in social politics. Being ghosted by her best friend for a week has Minelli looking like she's starring in a tragic bedtime musical. She flails, her internal monologue reaching dramatic heights as she claims to have raised him like her own child, which is impressive for a 5-year-old. A chibi Minelli kicks and screams, begging for an ounce of communication in this cold, silent house of doom. She trembles with rage, reminding the universe she's a child too and deserves attention, not the silent treatment. After a week of rolling on the floor, she's torn between trusting Setsu and wondering if she's been permanently unfriended. A single, dramatic tear rolls down her cheek as she realizes being a potential stepsister is harder than it looks. Her self-pity is interrupted by a sudden creak, as a familiar face finally decides to show up. Blonde-haired Lin bursts into the room, apologizing for his rudeness as if he didn't just walk in on a toddler's midlife crisis. Lin scratches his head, feeling awkward for barging in after his multiple knocks were completely ignored by the crying girl. Minelli's brain processes the information, staring at Lin and wondering if the plot threw her another curveball while she was busy sulking. Bombarded with confusing thoughts, she looks like she just tried to solve a math problem involving family trees and dukes. Hiding under a blanket, she laments her fate, deciding Setsu just doesn't want to see her commoner face anymore. Lin watches her with concern, guessing the impact of the title stepsister is a whole different ballgame than best friend. The scene shifts to a sunny room, with narration suggesting Setsu might just be overwhelmed by the sudden family expansion. Lin flashes a flowery smile, admitting he's actually excited about the prospect of her becoming the Duke's daughter. Minelli cocks her head in confusion, wondering why anyone would be happy about this messy northern soap opera. A chorus of peep-peep chick sounds surrounds a blushing Lin as he struggles to explain his innocent, adorable feelings. He quickly gets to the point, revealing the Duke has summoned the entire family for a very serious meeting in the Great Hall. Sitting on the bed, they realize the remarriage might be finalized before the dangerous ice wall expedition even begins. Minelli contemplates the speed of this romance, wondering if the Duke and her mom are speed-running their relationship goals. She thanks Lin and prepares to bolt, because no toddler wants to miss the biggest announcement in castle history. Minelli sprints across the snowy courtyard, determined to witness the legal union that will secure her lifetime of castle comfort. With a cold exhale, she stops to catch her breath, her tiny frame dwarfed by the grand northern winter. A chibi Minelli shivers like a leaf, realizing her cute coat strategy wasn't designed for an actual blizzard. Her legs wobble in the deep snow, but she refuses to turn back before her mom leaves for the grand ceremony. She spots her mother in the distance, who's standing in the freezing cold and looking like she's having a very emotional moment. Tears glisten on her mother's face as the weight of her new noble future finally sinks in. Minelli calls out but stops when she sees a dark-haired figure approaching her mom from the snowy shadows. The Duke pulls her mother into a protective embrace, proving even cold dukes have a very warm chest. Surrounded by roses, the two share a tender moment, looking like something straight off a high-end romance novel cover. Manelli watches from the sidelines, looking like a frozen popsicle while her parents enjoy their dramatic, snowy, romantic reunion. Snow falls on a glowing moon as the toddler realizes there's a lot about adult relationships she'll never understand. Back in bed, a feverish Manelli hides her condition, determined not to ruin the wedding with her toddler germs. She tosses and turns, worried that giving Setsu a cold would be more disastrous than the actual ice wall collapsing. With a sudden drop on her face, she wakes to find a teary-eyed Setsu watching over her sickbed. Setsu cries silently, looking heartbroken as he watches his friend go through a sudden, snow-induced medical crisis. He asks if she's okay, his voice trembling with more emotion than he's shown in the last 7 days combined. Manelli gives a weak, loving smile, assuring her favorite young master she'll never forget his pitiful, crying face. Setsu tells her that Dukes of the North must never cry, which is extra ironic given his face is currently a tear-streaked mess. She clutches her blanket, feeling both guilty and happy that the story's main character cares about her so much. With a shoo-shoo rustle, she tries to hide from the boy's overwhelming concern. Setsu tries to cover his eyes, but Manelli calls him out for crying again, effectively ending his cold Duke training. With a crisp clatter of a tray, maids whisper about the absolute chaos currently unfolding within the castle walls. The servants gossip about the upcoming coronation of the new Grand Duchess, as Manelli's mom walks toward her destiny. The mother consults a bespectacled doctor, worried the stress of the ice wall expedition will be too much. The doctor warns her to stay healthy, reminding her it takes more than tears to be a matriarch. Manelli's mother is in tears as the doctor orders her to rest, promising she'll be well taken care of. A feverish Manelli worries about Setsu's health, not realizing her own toddler immune system is currently losing the war. She remembers Setsu's rare and beautiful smile, a memory that shines brighter than any northern diamond. In matching pajamas, Setsu demands she leave so she doesn't catch his cold, radiating ultimate protective big brother energy. Manelli's brain freezes as she realizes she just called the young master by his first name. Whoops! The casual address shocks her, making her wonder if this whole encounter is just a fever dream. With a gentle pat, a hand confirms it is indeed a dream, albeit a very vivid one. Manelli's logic dictates a sick Setsu wouldn't be in her room, concluding he must be tucked away safely. She hugs herself with a blissful smile, deciding even a dream version of Setsu is worth worrying about. The Duke stands in a blizzard, vowing to prevent the lonely, tragic future written in the original story. Manelli, nestled in her blankets, blames herself for getting Setsu excluded from the dangerous ice wall expedition. Lin pops up to mention that Uncle Loki is lonely, sending Manelli into a state of visible confusion. Lin claims the terrifying head chef sees her as his own daughter, prompting an epic toddler stare of "huh." A hilarious vision of scar-faced Loki offering dessert proves his version of fatherly love involves sugar and nightmares. Lin discusses the upcoming wedding, but Manelli isn't keen on her sudden promotion to future daughter of the Duke. She insists she's not the Duke's biological daughter, though Lin argues the man listens to her every word. Manelli pouts, only remembering a serious, scary man, while Lin laughs off the Duke's resting jerk face. Looking out the window, Manelli concludes the Duke is largely responsible for ruining Setsu's childhood joy. A determined look on her face, she vows to stop the Duke from dying 3 years early. Lin jumps up, promising to protect her, not realizing he's just been recruited into her personal fan club. Manelli glows with confidence, noting that someone is clearly falling for her main character charm. She admits she has no regrets, especially since Setsu's handsome face is a top tier. Workplace benefit. Lin officially swears his loyalty, which Manelli happily accepts, proving she's the real boss of this household. A sudden bang echoes as Loki bursts through the door, looking panicked and shouting Manelli's name. The world goes dark as Loki delivers the devastating news. Manelli's mother is missing. A cold wind howls through the castle as Manelli wonders how her mother could possibly vanish in a snowy fortress. Narration confirms the ice wall has been peaceful for years, right up until this disastrous moment. Manelli sweats in terror, staring blankly as her brain races to process the sudden collapse of her happy timeline. Dialogue reveals the Duke was swallowed by an avalanche while desperately trying to save Manelli's mother. Maids whisper in front of a portrait, wondering how the Duke could go missing in his own backyard. With a short, terrified gasp, Manelli hides in the shadows, eavesdropping on the servants' cruel gossip. She realizes the Duke's death happened 3 years early, effectively shattering the original novel's logic. She trembles with guilt, wondering if her actions accidentally cursed her parents to an early, snowy grave. With a heavy thud, the narrative highlights a portrait of a woman, foreshadowing a deep family secret. The portrait overlooks the scene, a silent witness to the changing fate of the Alchemon family. Lynn rushes to a collapsing Manelli, calling her name as she breaks down. Under the weight of the news, with a trembling query, Lynn asks if she's okay as she kneels in despair. Manelli realizes the original novel never mentioned the Duke remarrying Judy, meaning the script is completely trashed. A vision of the happy couple serves as a painful reminder that their love story led to this tragedy. She stares ahead with empty eyes, accepting that she's the one who broke the original story. Lynn tries to comfort her, but Manelli's internal screaming of "it's my fault" is lost on him. Lynn watches in shock as Manelli realizes the novel's plot has been fast-forwarded by 3 years. Manelli sobs into her hands, realizing the future is now a complete mystery. Setsu makes a grand entrance in his best fur coat, looking every bit the future Grand Duke. With a giant tear rolling down, Manelli looks up at her young master, hoping for a shred of good news. Setsu kneels and takes her hand, vowing he will personally find her missing mother. A spark of hope ignites in the heroic Manelli as she asks if he's really going to brave the blizzard for her. With a firm grip, she clutches his hand, reminding him he's supposed to be on bed rest. Setsu confidently declares that only he can handle the dark spirits lurking in the frozen north. With a gentle shoo, he wipes away her tears, promising to return for the expedition healthy. Setsu gives a rare, heartwarming smile, telling Manelli not to get sick, while she wonders when he got so charming. The butler urges the young master to get going, and Setsu finally heads out into the cold, snowy unknown. The narration explains that Setsu's dark spirit is the ultimate search engine for finding missing people in a massive blizzard. A massive purple serpent emerges from the shadows, a terrifying guardian that requires an incredible amount of magic to control. Setsu stands alone against the swirling white void, looking like a tiny fur cloud warrior ready to take on the world. Back at the castle, a worried Manelli is curled up on the floor, her toddler anxiety at an all-time high. She stares into the distance with teary eyes, terrified the blizzard will swallow her favorite dark-haired protagonist, too. The narrative takes a turn as the dark spirit finally locates the Duke and her mother, prompting a shocked reaction. 2 heavy, wooden coffins rest silently in the snow, marking the grim end of a once hopeful northern romance. A heartbroken Manelli clings to her mother's cold body, wailing at the terrible price of her script intervention. She stares at her mother's peaceful face, desperately hoping this is just a nap and not a permanent plot twist. Kneeling in the cold dirt, the toddler wallows in guilt, convinced her shipping hobby got her parents killed. Setsu approaches with a heavy heart, sincerely apologizing for not being able to bring them back safely. Manelli grabs his hand, insisting the young master has absolutely nothing to apologize for in this snowy tragedy. She yells that it's all her fault, leaving a confused Setsu to wonder why she's taking the blame for Mother Nature. Looking at the coffins, she realizes her meddling turned an unofficial romance into a literal death sentence for the couple. Setsu tries to comfort the crying girl, reminding her the tragedy isn't anyone's fault. Despite her internal panic about the script, she cries silently, knowing the original novel's plot has been obliterated and she has no idea what comes next. The narrator warns that a greedy, cruel adult is about to arrive and turn Setsu's life into a living nightmare. A mysterious woman in a dramatic red cloak arrives at the castle, signaling the official start of the suffering era. A malicious voice identifies Manelli as the woman's daughter, and frankly, the vibe immediately becomes sickening. Setsu and Manelli turn to face the newcomer, neither looking pleased with this sudden intrusion on their grief. With a gust of cold wind, the silver-haired woman rudely asks if the children recognize her. She looks down on them with a judgmental gaze, demanding to know if they recognize her obvious superior social standing. Setsu steps forward, calling her rude and demanding she introduce herself, proving he's still the boss of this snowy household. The woman scoffs, finding it a massive red flag for everyone that her nephew hasn't heard of her. She insults Minelli as a useless girl, causing the pink-haired toddler to wonder if she should just throw hands. A protective fire flashes in Setsu's eyes as he demands an immediate apology, refusing to let anyone belittle the person he cares for most. The woman sighs dramatically, asking if this is how he treats his new guardian. Well, that's one way to ruin a funeral. A text box reveals Lady Camilla is the mean older sister of Setsu's birth mother, Lorlina. The family reunion is a bust. A flashback shows Lorlina was a prominent younger daughter, clearly not ready for the harsh, monster-filled days of the North. Lorlina used to live a life of luxury until her marriage to the Duke became a thunderbolt in a letter. Lorlina describes the castle as a den of hissing vipers, sounding very much like a horror movie protagonist. Camilla holds the letter with a sinister look, realizing this piece of paper is her golden ticket to controlling the inheritance. The narrator confirms Camilla was never here to help, her presence only serving to make Setsu's childhood a living hell. Camilla formally introduces herself as Aunt Camilla Winter, announcing her plan to manage internal affairs and the children until further notice. She flashes a wicked, sharp smirk, confirming she is 100% the villain the narrator warned about earlier. Camilla immediately goes into evil stepmother mode, deciding her first order of business is to discipline the arrogant servants. Minelli stares blankly ahead, realizing that between the dead parents and the evil aunt, her cozy castle life is officially over. With a crisp clap of her hands, Camilla demands the butler kick Minelli out of the castle immediately. Talk about an eviction notice. She scolds the butler's tone, acting like she already owns the place even though the Duke's body is barely cold. Minelli glares at the evil woman, noting she's already acting like the Grand Duchess of Alchemon without any legal authority. Camilla screeches in outrage, unable to handle a toddler daring to make eye contact. Someone needs a long nap. With a swift interception, a hand blocks Camilla's slap, saving Minelli from an uncalled-for, high-speed face pat. The butler grips her wrist firmly, reminding her the servants are watching and she'd better cool it. Camilla yanks her hand back, utterly disgusted that a lowly servant dared to touch her mid-villainy. Minelli watches with a deadpan expression, thinking Camilla is speed-running the process of making every single person hate her. The aunt doubles down on her hate, claiming she doesn't care if the girl freezes to death over past family drama. Minelli clenches her fists, vowing to stay by Setsu's side no matter how many evil ants show up. The butler checks on her with a kind smile, and Minelli puts on her best I'm fine face to keep the peace. A determined look wears well with pink hair as Minelli decides to endure the chaos for the plot. Her smile was a weapon to distract the evil aunt and to keep poor Setsu from getting involved. A trembling ah is heard in the background as Minelli realizes her plans for a peaceful life have hit a major snag. Seeing the boarded-up room, the harsh reality reminds her that the castle has become a lot less welcoming. Sitting in the hallway, she finds a glimmer of hope, knowing she has at least 30 days before she's out on the streets. Sir Cal proves to be a true gentleman, offering the little pink-haired girl an escape route from her sea of suffering. Apparently, Cal's home is a boys-only zone, and they desperately need some pink-haired energy to balance things out. Minelli plays the martyr, refusing the offer to protect her savior from the vile retaliation Lady Camilla would surely launch. Sir Cal respects the little girl's perseverance, and she vows to survive this chaos on her own 2 feet. Lady Camilla looms over a studious Setsu, turning his library time into a hellish high-pressure corporate internship. Hasty chewing sounds are heard in the background as the narration emphasizes the desperate hunger of someone eating in the dark. Curled up in a corner, Minelli treats the piece of bread like it's the last meal she'll ever see. Uncle Loki risks a screaming lecture from the aunt to sneak bread to the girl he calls Little Mouse, a scene so heartwarming it instantly brightens the room. Setsu makes his grand entrance, looking exhausted but still radiating main character energy. Minelli launches herself at her little master for a hug, because nothing heals a bad day like a pure, innocent cuddle between children. A soft ooh is heard in the background as they lean on each other, finding a small island of peace in the turbulent castle. Setsu immediately notices her weight loss, proving he's the most perceptive 8-year-old in the entire Northern Kingdom. She puts puts on a brave face, hiding her hunger as she refuses to add to Setsu's growing stress. Against a backdrop of teddy bears, Setsu admits his worries, sending Minelli's inner fangirl screams to maximum decibels. Her heart blooms with joy as she realizes her favorite broody male lead has leveled up in the maturity department. Minelli reminds him of his promise to be honest, and Setsu doubles down on his loyalty like a true knight. A fierce gore is heard in the background as Minelli fumes over the ant daring to criticize Setsu's perfect etiquette skills. Setsu sits on the floor, exhausted by the upcoming ceremony and his aunt's endless nagging perfectionism. Minelli expresses a heartfelt apology, but Setsu is too busy playing the stoic hero to accept any blame. Guilt washes over her as she wonders if her meddling with the script has turned Setsu's life into this exhausting, joyless grind. She holds back tears, knowing her crying would only break Setsu's already fragile, overworked heart even more. With a determined gaze, Setsu orders her to stay in Alchemon, no matter how cruel his aunt becomes. Cupid's arrow strikes again as Minelli realizes her little master has officially become her favorite person in the world. With a firm thump, she pounds her chest, vowing to be his ride-or-die partner until the very end. The pair walks side by side, a tiny but mighty united front against the tyranny of the evil aunt. Anxiety skyrockets as the succession ceremony looms, threatening to change their lives and the castle's hierarchy forever. Minelli gazes at Setsu, seeing the future ruler in the eyes of the exhausted little boy. Under a sky of falling snow, the narration turns somber as Minelli whispers a final goodbye to her mother. Standing before a coffin in the snow, the pink-haired orphan feels the heavy weight of her new reality. The little pink-haired girl stands alone in the vast, echoing cathedral, dwarfed by the grand architecture of Alchemon's solemn chapel. Minelli approaches the dark wooden coffin, her small frame a stark contrast to the cold, heavy atmosphere of the funeral hall. Surrounded by pure white lilies, Lorelina lies in peaceful repose, having finally found the serenity that the harsh northern life had denied her. Looking down at her mother, Minelli wonders if the woman was truly content, passing away in the arms of her beloved. A moment of quiet reflection follows, with the narration suggesting that perhaps, in the end, Lorelina's heart was full despite the tragedy. Standing by the casket, Minelli realizes Setsu's original path was a mirror of her own, a life defined by loss and lingering misfortune. With determination flashing in her violet eyes, she vows to break the cycle of misfortune, refusing to let Setsu's future remain scripted for tragedy. Whispering a final promise to the flowers, the little girl dedicates herself to protecting her young master from a lifetime of longing. The funeral proceeds with grim efficiency as the royal envoy prepares to formally recognize Setsu's succession. Before the grieving family, a steady hand pins a ceremonial medal to Setsu's chest, officially marking the transfer of power to the youngest Grand Duke in history. Minelli watches from the side with a proud, teary smile, looking like a doting mother at her child's kindergarten graduation. Setsu stands tall in his royal regalia, looking unusually majestic for a kid who probably still needs help reaching the top shelf. Minelli gushes to Uncle Loki about how photogenic Setsu is, basically admitting she'd be a total paparazzi Annie if cameras existed here. She closes her eyes with a contented sigh, reaffirming that her little master is special and deserves the best. A bright, bubbly expression appears on her face as she celebrates Setsu's transformation, proving her fangirl heart is still going strong. Hearts and sparkles fly as Minelli beams with pride, while Uncle Loki watches on, clearly concerned by her sudden burst of childlike energy. The camera pans across rows of solemn guests, emphasizing the heavy weight of tradition resting on the young heir's shoulders. The piece is shattered as Lady Camilla shrieks in outrage, calling Minelli an insolent brat for daring to be in the vicinity. Pointing a gloved finger, Camilla demands to know how a lowly girl dares to occupy a seat of honor at such a grand event. Minelli stares blankly, realizing the evil aunt doesn't even need a good reason to be a top-tier hater. It's just her hobby. Uncle Loki steps in with a protective glare, reminding the noblewoman that Manelli has also lost everything and deserves basic human decency. A warm feeling spreads through Manelli from Loki's firm hand on her shoulder, making her realize not everyone in this castle is a villain. She smiles to herself, thinking that if this old man is willing to defend her, maybe her efforts to be useful haven't been in vain. Camilla scoffs in disdain, convinced the castle has suddenly been overrun by insolent fools who don't respect her self-appointed authority. The aunt's face twists in elitist rage as she questions how a lowly commoner could possibly understand the concept of freedom or rights. The assembled vassals and the royal envoy watch the drama unfold, their blurred silhouettes adding to the oppressive feeling of the public confrontation. Fed up with the bullying, Manelli marches forward with determined steps, ready to drop some corporate-grade truth bombs on her wicked relative. To gain the literal high ground, the little girl climbs onto a bench and points at Camilla to formally declare her unfit to manage. The tiny, pink-haired revolutionary stands her ground against her towering aunt, her fearless and very public accusation shocking the entire room. With fire in her eyes and a scowl on her face, Manelli warns that her anger is just the prelude to a reckoning. An inner voice reveals the harsh truth. Camilla is a toxic influence who will only lead the young Grand Duke into a pit of misery. Manelli lists the aunt's specific abuses, from withholding food to nailing doors shut, while Camilla's hand twitches with the urge to silence this mouse. A crisp smack is heard in the background as Camilla's palm connects with Manelli's face, proving the villainess has officially lost her mind and her decorum. Dark energy swirls around the aunt as she claims the family only prospered because of her, demanding gratitude from the staff, not insolence. Shrouded in shadow, Manelli listens to the woman's delusional sermon on the hardships of managing a noble household, clearly unimpressed by the excuses. The narration confirms that despite her grandstanding, Camilla was actually a mess with internal affairs and probably couldn't even balance a checkbook. By the time Setsu was supposed to take over, the estate was drowning in debt, proving that in the original timeline, Camilla was better at spending than managing. The villainess didn't even face consequences. She just took the money and ran, abandoning the family like a true corporate criminal. An aura of rage erupts around Manelli, furious at her aunt's blatant lies, her accountant's soul screaming at the financial audacity. Accountant mode activated. Manelli recalls her degree from her past life and calls out Lady Camilla's financial fraud on the spot. The little girl declares flatly that she could manage the estate better with her tiny hands than this silver-haired villainess ever could. Lady Camilla shrieks in fury, raising a gloved hand for a slap that would have absolutely ruined the funeral's vibe. Setsu arrives in full regalia, his voice cutting through the tension to firmly back Manelli's bold claim. The boy formally announces his title, reminding everyone present that he is the Grand Duke and Manelli is his top priority. Camilla is left speechless, realizing her nephew just demoted her to the status of an outsider. Manelli watches in awe, realizing the little boy she was protecting has finally stepped into his role as a leader. The narration reveals that Setsu wasn't just reading books. He was biding his time to seize absolute power. Camilla storms off, convinced the children will come crawling back to her the second they see a spreadsheet. A hush falls over the hall as the era of the evil aunt comes to a very satisfyingly abrupt end. As the adrenaline wears off, Manelli collapses to the floor, trembling, processing her first corporate-style showdown. A concerned voice asks if she's okay, pulling the pink-haired accountant back to the reality of her small child body. With a lively hee-hee, she admits her legs have turned to jelly after that world-class display of pure audacity. Manelli raises a practical concern. Now that the villain is gone, who's going to handle the court's internal affairs? Setsu looks at her with a knowing gaze, having clearly already picked his new manager. He points at Manelli, officially nominating his little girl sidekick to run the entire duchy. Good luck with that, kid. Surrounded by blooming roses, Manelli stares with wide, curious eyes, seemingly contemplating her unexpected new role as the Grand Duke's tiny accountant. The scene snaps to the present, where a slightly older Manelli looks worried, wondering if entrusting the duchy's survival to her 8-year-old self was a wise move. Standing in the empty cathedral, she reflects on her master's degree in accounting, which, while great, doesn't change the fact that she's still technically a child in this world. Two hands clasped tightly, one belonging to the future ruler and the other to his tiny manager, symbolizing a bond that transcends mere service. Setsu asks if she will stay by his side, even if the duchy falls, proving he values her company far more than his actual legacy. The little master flashes a rare, genuine smile, telling her it's perfectly fine if their rule is a failure, as long as they're together. The little pink-haired girl blushes, her heart full as she realizes that seeing her favorite character smile is reward enough. A young Setsu laughs while holding Manelli's hand, finding his tiny intern accountant ridiculously cute. An older Manelli watches her younger self and Setsu, playfully calling him a fool for not taking her seriously. Surrounded by flowers, the grand castle of the north stands firm in the snow, a silent witness to the changing times. Lady Camilla stares in horror at a formal request for reparations, her silver hair practically standing on end from the sheer audacity. The villainess screams into the darkness, furious that her 7-year-old niece dared to run a legal audit on her. Manelli stands her ground, accusing the evil and of trying to embezzle lunch money from a child. With fire in her eyes, the little pink-haired girl delivers a verbal smackdown that shames her relative. Camilla's dramatic tirade continues as she yells at a bewildered guard, basically shredding her own dignity. The narration switches to a teenaged Manelli recalling her past life credentials, a cold city woman with a master's in accounting. A maid asks where the pink-haired prodigy learned such advanced skills, completely floored by the little girl's genius. Manelli laughs off the question, knowing the adults are completely baffled by her sudden display of corporate management skills. Tiny hands, big ledgers. The little pink-haired girl sits at a massive desk, surrounded by a crowd of curious staff. Focus is key as the tiny manager reviews documents, her big blue eyes searching for every missing coin. The castle staff quickly learned to stop asking questions, as the little girl's efficiency became the stuff of legend. Holding a quill, Manelli is just glad the adults are too intimidated by her aura to pry into her secrets. Manelli pumps her fist cheerfully, vowing to raise Setsu into the most heroic, dark-haired Grand Duke the North has ever seen. Time passes, and the pink-haired girl sits in a lavish room, reflecting on the luxurious life she's finally obtained. She realizes her body feels light and energetic, finally free from the soul-crushing sleepiness of her overworked past life. Reborn and refreshed, the older pink-haired girl celebrates the perks of a young body and a fresh start. She stands tall in her pajamas, psyching herself up for another day of duchy management and doting on her master. Admiring her lavish quarters, she marvels at how far she's come from being a shivering orphan in the snow. A flashback shows a young Manelli passed out at her desk from exhaustion, proving that being a manager is a grind even in your dreams. The tiny workaholic was reviewing internal affairs, muttering about having only 3 ledgers left. The narration explains that taking over her late mother's large room was the only logical step for the new manager. Now a teenager, Manelli blushes with delight, revealing she actually won the fancy room in a high-stakes bet. The pink-haired girl strides through the stone corridors in stylish boots, looking ready to tackle any financial crisis. The maids greet her with bright smiles, formally addressing their favorite pink-haired strategist as advisor. Her staff notes her high spirits, clasping their hands in admiration as they bask in her positive energy. With a confident smile, Manelli confirms she's in a great mood and ready to dominate the daily schedule. The pink-haired girl smiles warmly, her mind already formulating plans for the duchy's future success. A vision of the beautiful, blonde Canaria appears, setting the stage for the original story's romantic heroine. Setsu and Canaria share a fateful glance, with the narration confirming their love-at-first-sight moment at the Grand Royal Ball. Fangirl mode activated. Manelli gushes over the upcoming romance plot, her heart fluttering at the thought of a happy ending. She holds her face in her hands, declaring that the original plot must succeed, leaving the maids utterly confused by her fanaticism. One of the maids blushes while talking to her, showing just how much the staff adores their advisor. Setsu stands tall in his formal wear, his coming-of-age ceremony described as a modest affair without the traditional pomp. Manelli admires her master's growth, praising him for finally perfecting the classic dark-haired, Grand Duke aesthetic. A tender reflection follows as she considers that all the duchy's hard work has been for her master. The maids giggle, wondering if the castle's empty throne will finally welcome a new Grand Duchess. A shocked, Chibi Manelli panics internally, wondering how on earth the maid knew about the secret plot details. The pink-haired girl laughs along with the staff, keeping the mood light while hiding her deep knowledge of the script. She wonders if the maids are just excited to hand off the stressful internal affairs to the new bride. Reflecting on her own worth, Manelli smiles, knowing her accounting skills are her ultimate weapon in this world. Sudden job anxiety hits as the advisor sighs over her future credentials once her master is married. The maids positively insist they'll follow her wherever she goes, leaving the advisor confused but genuinely grateful. Manelli lets out a confused huh as she finds herself being stared down by a crowd of overly enthusiastic castle associates. The maids cheer for their idolized advisor, basically forming a pink-haired fan club and putting way too much pressure on her shoulders. Manelli strides down the hall, complaining that she's dealing with company money, not a personal fortune, proving her work ethic is still top-notch. She stops short as a thought strikes her, her wide eyes reflecting a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. A fragmented vision of a handsome man in black flashes by, a stylish reminder that this story still has plenty of secrets and pretty boys in store. A handsome, dark-haired Setsu calls out to Manelli, radiating male lead energy against a floral background. The pink-haired girl stares ahead with determination, her transformation into a beautiful and capable young woman now complete. A blushing, starstruck Manelli gushes over the adult Setsu, her fangirl heart still beating for her favorite master. The narrator confirms that thanks to Manelli's diligent care, Setsu has grown from a sickly child into a masterpiece of muscular aesthetic. With adoration shining in her eyes, Manelli's inner fangirl is fully awakened by the sight of the grown-up Setsu. The pink-haired advisor acknowledges that years of care have turned her little master into a real man. Standing in the castle, Manelli scolds the Grand Duke for his blindingly brilliant smile, while Setsu admits he can't help it. Surrounded by hearts, the advisor worries that her motherly affection is being replaced by something far more complicated and deadly. Manelli wears a serene smile, enjoying the peaceful fruits of her 20 years of intense duchy management. Setsu leans in close, demanding she drop the formal titles and just call him by his name, Setsu. The flustered, pink-haired advisor refuses, claiming there's no way she could be so casual with her employer. She argues that as a humble commoner, addressing the Grand Duke by his first name would be a major breach of protocol. Manelli squints suspiciously, worried that getting too close now will lead to messy misunderstandings with the heroine, Canaria, later. Hearts overflow as the advisor celebrates the novel's plot officially kicking off, a full 20 years into her reincarnation. Setsu interrupts her fangirl moment with a warm smile, inviting her to a private breakfast together. A hesitant, pink-haired Manelli complains that the Grand Duke always uses mealtime as an excuse to overfeed her tiny managerial soul. Setsu teases her for being too thin and small, while Manelli insists it's just because he's a supersized genetic anomaly. She explains with a pout that height is 80 genetics, so his plan to make her grow by feeding her is scientifically flawed. Setsu looks crushed, asking if she was just destined to be this tiny from birth, while the advisor sulks in a corner. The pink-haired girl crosses her arms and firmly refuses, telling His Grace to enjoy his breakfast alone in confinement. Setsu plays his ultimate trump card, claiming he'll just skip breakfast and starve, since eating alone is just too lonely and difficult. An inner thought reveals Manelli sees right through this dirty trick, vowing to resist her master's emotional manipulation of her appetite. She lets out a firm huff, repeating her refusal to be guilt-tripped into a second breakfast. Setsu plays the puppy card, literally sprouting dog ears, as he gives her his most heart-wrenching sad eyes. With a poof of a broken heart, Manelli's logical defenses instantly crumble before the Grand Duke's weaponized cuteness. The scene shifts to the castle's snowy towers, marking the end of the morning's great breakfast negotiation war. A red-haired assistant pushes up his glasses, asking what on earth happened to the advisor during her morning session. Manelli collapses on the couch, looking ready to burst, begging her assistant to stop talking before she explodes. The assistant sighs at the advisor's inability to refuse the Grand Duke, while Manelli sweats from overeating. Mentally, the advisor challenges anyone to face the Grand Duke's brilliant, weaponized smile and try to say no with a straight face. The mood turns serious as the assistant reports that a suspicious woman has been captured at the castle gates, and Canaria has finally arrived. A flashback shows a carriage in the snow as the red-haired assistant brings up a particularly embarrassing anecdote about the advisor. Back in the present-day carriage, a pink-haired Manelli covers her face in shame, screaming for her assistant to shut up. A thought bubble shows a young Manelli crying, haunted by the memory of her wailing when Setsu caught a cold once. The narration reveals the adult Setsu is the fearsome monster of the North, a terrifying reputation Manelli deliberately created to protect him. The advisor blushes, recalling how her teenage delusions led her to create such a monstrous nickname for her beloved master. A pink-haired Manelli gushes over her perfectly laid plans, while her assistant gives her a look of pure judgment. The advisor looks confused as her assistant questions the logic of her actions, or possibly her sudden mood swings. Realization hits him like a lightning bolt as the advisor processes the description. The suspicious woman is definitely the heroine, Canaria. Faced with a crisis, Manelli decides it's time to deploy her most dangerous secret weapon, the power of pathological lying. Her special skill is just making things up, leaving her red-haired assistant, Shauna, looking completely exhausted with life. Shauna expertly pushes up his glasses, diagnosing Manelli's logic as pure inductive nonsense, not actual deductive reasoning. Manelli lets out an embarrassed shriek as Shauna brings up the sword-talking incident, begging him to bury that memory forever. A painful flashback reveals the exact moment a young Manelli burst into a room to have a heart-to-heart with a sword. A pink-haired Manelli giggles while holding a sword, clearly proud of the name she's given it, Ozblade. Surrounded by staff, the advisor gleefully presents the blade, while her subordinates watch their tiny manager with concern. Manelli sweats under the pressure of several judgmental gazes, trying to play it cool while the staff whispers nearby. Inside the carriage, the red-haired assistant brings up the embarrassing Ozblade name, causing Manelli to cringe in agony. A pink-haired Manelli fumes, thinking she should have just stuck with the original novel's cringy name, Sleeping Chaos, instead of her own edit. The red-haired assistant pushes up his glasses, sternly warning the advisor to stay away from the gates for her own safety. The assistant insists that dealing with suspicious intruders is a job for the Grand Duke or the captain of the guard. Manelli stares silently into the void, clearly ignoring the sound advice from her stressed-out legal counsel. The pink-haired advisor smiles brightly and argues that Lin is too much of a pushover with women to handle gate duty effectively. A flashback reveals Lin has evolved from an innocent country boy into a full-blown playboy, much to Manelli's amusement. A loud pfft is heard in the background as the red-haired assistant loses his professional composure and bursts out laughing at the advisor's bluntness. A genuinely startled, pink-haired Manelli asks her assistant why he's laughing so hard at a completely serious observation. The girl is surrounded by question marks, wondering which part of her management report accidentally turned into a stand-up comedy routine. The scene shifts to a carriage arriving at the snow-covered gates of Alchemon, while the bickering continues inside. The narration explains that the territory's massive ice wall is an impenetrable fortress against monsters and unwanted visitors. Despite the wall's reputation for keeping people out, the carriage pulls up to the gate, ready for a fateful meeting. Princess Canaria is the only one who can bypass the ice wall, and now Manelli and Shauna have finally arrived to investigate. Escorted by guards, the pink-haired advisor and her assistant trudge through the snow toward the gate. A guard asks why she's here, and Manelli explains she's investigating the report of a suspicious intruder. She expresses concern that the intruder is a young woman, and the old guard nods in complete understanding. As they enter the castle, Manelli asks if the guard was mistreated, but he assures her he's fine. The butterflies in Manelli's stomach turn into buzzing chainsaws as she realizes the novel's true heroine is just behind the door. Inside a cell, a hooded blonde woman waits, while Manelli hopes this meeting will secure Setsu's eventual happy ending. The pink-haired advisor puts on her most professional persona and offers a bright greeting to the mysterious captive protagonist. Hearts float around as Canaria is clearly taken aback by Manelli's energetic entrance in her gloomy cell. The blonde intruder asks if she's supposed to be believed, clearly suspicious of the pink-haired girl's overly friendly demeanor. Manelli notes that Canaria is wary, which is fair considering she's been thrown in a dungeon. Playing the ultimate wingman, Manelli tells the distinguished guest that she must leave immediately to avoid causing trouble. Canaria is confused, asking why this pink-haired girl would help her escape. Manelli explains that as the Grand Duke's loyal advisor, her top priority is ensuring Setsu's happiness, and the blonde princess is clearly his fated love. Canaria was completely stunned, wondering what kind of reverse psychology jailbreak trick the pink-haired girl was playing. After seeing the red opal phoenix jewelry, Manelli confirmed that this was definitely Canaria, the heroine who wore the treasure that sealed the fire spirit. The pink-haired advisor maintained a serene smile, while the blonde princess continued to look like her brain had just rebooted. Shauna questioned what kind of game Manelli was playing, but the advisor just kept her poker face. Standing before the iron bars, Manelli formally welcomed the prisoner to Alchemon with the hospitality of a five-star hotel. The scene shifts to a carriage where three women sit together in what is probably the world's most awkward carpool. A halo surrounded Canaria, confirming her identity as the story's breathtakingly beautiful and ill-fated heroine. Manelli went into full fangirl mode, covering her face and screaming internally about how stunning the heroine was in person. Canaria leaned in curiously, asking if her name was really Manelli Bava, finally showing a bit of interest in her savior. The advisor smiled warmly, telling her to use whichever name she felt comfortable with, as it was all about a warm, friendly vibe now. When Canaria asked if the Grand Duke knew she was here, Manelli confirmed that he wanted her to scout things out in advance. Canaria clarified that she wasn't actually engaged, pointing out in a very defensive tone that she was younger than the Crown Prince. A flashback depicts a royal ball where a queen-like figure worries about a tyrant threatening to burn her country down. The narration introduces an overbearing emperor who believes he owns all women, while a chibi which watches sadly. The narration describes the emperor's extreme sense of entitlement against a backdrop of ominous blood-red lilies and dark shadows. The Crown Prince is revealed to be just as much of a jerk as his father, apparently on his way to Alchemon to throw a fit. Fury ignited in Manelli's eyes as she swore that this time, the self-important prince wouldn't even get a chance to set foot here. While Canaria remained calm and elegant, Manelli was practically radiating the murderous flames of a protective manager's rage. The blonde princess eventually drifted off to sleep, looking peaceful despite the chaotic political situation around her. Manelli stole a glance, marveling at how the girl managed to stay beautiful even while napping. Pure heroine aura. Shayna, looking stressed, leaned in, sweating as she asked Manelli what grand plan she had for their houseguest. The assistant warned that Canaria was basically a walking war trophy who was bound to bring mountains of trouble. Shauna worried the prince wouldn't just stand by, but Manelli dismissed her concerns with a confident and playful wave. The pink-haired girl looked pleased, noting that Canaria was exhausted from scaling the massive ice wall alone. As night fell over the snow castle, the narration mentioned that Alchemon was a quiet dominion under the Grand Duke's rule. Shayna doubted her friend's sanity, but Manelli insisted all this madness was for Setsu's own good. Stepping out of the carriage late at night, the advisor looked ready to end her long day of heroine management. Manelli's heart skipped a beat when she saw Setsu, surprise written all over her face. In the moonlight, the adult Setsu looked dashing in his fur-lined cloak, making Manelli wonder where on earth he was going so late. Seeing his traveling boots and heavy cloak, she realized he was preparing to go somewhere that was definitely not on her schedule. Setsu startled her by suddenly closing the distance and calling her name, his abrupt proximity sending the advisor's fangirl heart into overdrive. Setsu massaged his temples, looking completely exhausted as he searched for his missing advisor in the moonlight. The monster of the north froze when Princess Canaria stepped out of the carriage, looking every bit the fated and radiant flamboyant heroine. Manelli presented her catch, explaining that the intruder was actually the woman destined to steal the Grand Duke's heart. Dressed in a gown of roses and light, Canaria gave a formal curtsy to the stunned Grand Duke of Alchemon. Manelli looked like a proud matchmaker who had just won the lottery, watching her master stare at the princess and flashing a brilliant trust-me smile. The advisor suggested that the exhausted princess needed rest, not an interrogation. Setsu was uncharacteristically silent, his intense gaze fixed on the unexpected visitor who had just bypassed his legendary ice wall. The Grand Duke brushed aside his confusion and retreated, giving Manelli full authority over the domain's newest resident. Manelli watched Setsu's retreating back, feeling like a genius puppet master whose ultimate matchmaking plan was finally taking shape. The scene shifts to the other side of the continent, to a sunny, sprawling southern palace that looks far less chilly than Alchemon. A flamboyant man with pink hair in a white uniform strode through the halls as ladies whispered about his sudden appearance. The local gossip mill went into overdrive, wondering why Admiral Passa had finally deigned to visit the capital. Living up to fan expectations, the Admiral sent out a devastatingly charming wink that could probably sink an entire fleet. The noble ladies' hearts nearly flew out of their chests, convinced the Admiral's flirtatious wink was a personal message just for them. The Admiral swaggered past his swooning fan club, maintaining his cool guy facade, while the ladies continued to lose their minds. The narration introduces him as Passa's naval commander, a man who usually stayed far away from the snowy north. Despite being a high-ranking marquis, he was a sailor at heart, preferring the salty moniker to his formal title. With a heavy creak of a door, the Admiral pushed open the gates, ready to face whatever boring royal summons awaited. A calm voice greeted the newcomer, welcoming a man named Josh back to the center of political boredom. Seated behind a mountain of documents, a silver-haired, red-eyed man watched the pink-haired sailor's dramatic entrance. Admiral Passa immediately complained about the long journey, demanding to know why he'd been dragged away from his ocean. The silver-haired man offered no sympathy, holding up a file and smiling as he reminded the Admiral that duty was not a suggestion. The silver-haired royal explained that he'd summoned the Admiral to cool him down from his recent maritime rampage. The Admiral leaned back on the sofa, scoffing at being treated like a madman for simply doing his naval duty. The silver-haired man questioned if wiping out pirates was the only excuse for the Admiral's recent overkill. The Admiral, looking like a bored teenager, argued that a cleaner, pirate-free ocean was objectively a win-win for everyone. The silver-haired man sighed, turning his attention back to the documents as he prepared to drop a bigger problem. The pink-haired Admiral kicked up his feet and asked about his new mission, clearly hoping for something more exciting than paperwork. The prompt revealed the scandal. The Emperor's scheduled 12th concubine had pulled a disappearing act, vanishing into thin air. The Admiral joked about burning down towns or setting sail, showing his usual extreme approach to minor inconveniences. The silver-haired man tossed Manelli's file onto the table, ordering the Admiral to retrieve the fugitive from Alchemon. Admiral Passa flatly refused, clearly uninterested in a trip to the frozen northern wastelands. The royal leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his red eyes, promising he had a very tempting bribe. The Admiral's playful attitude vanished, replaced by sharp focus as he sensed the intrigue in the air. A detailed profile of Manelli Bava appeared, revealing that the advisor's secret identity might not be a secret for much longer. Back in the present, Manelli stood in her best purple gown, completely unaware she was now a wanted woman. The advisor was ecstatic, bouncing down the hallway, convinced her happily ever after plan was going perfectly. Manelli watched Canaria and Setsu from shadows, humming a little tune to celebrate the first step of her grand romantic scheme. Plotting her next move, she looked forward to the upcoming ball, already picturing the princess in a gown that would break the Grand Duke's heart. Manelli ran off to alter the dress, leaving a trail of sparkles and a group of confused maids in her wake. The pink-haired girl gushed about how stunning the noble guest was in person. The castle staff were already buzzing, admitting they'd never seen a beauty like the mysterious blonde newcomer. Manelli gathered the maids, asking if they agreed that the princess was the most beautiful creature on earth. The maids gushed over Canaria's jewel-like eyes and impossible waistline, proving the heroine's aura worked on everyone. Manelli smiled through the stress, instructing the staff to treat their guest like royalty. She was impressed by the maid's professional speed, but they were horrified when Manelli announced she was giving Canaria the most prominent room in the entire castle. Manelli defended her choice, remembering that in the original story, this room was key to the romance. A romantic vision showed Canaria singing on the terrace, a scene destined to crack open Setsu's cold, monstrous heart. The advisor struck a dramatic pose, fangirling over the divine, singing voice that was about to save the domain. The mood was ruined when Shayna pointed out that Manelli had been secretly packing her bags for a quick getaway. Manelli's attempt at a covert packing job had utterly failed, as the staff already knew she was preparing for an upcoming royal birthday. The maids were a little horrified that Manelli had assigned that room to the guest. Palace floor plans were apparently serious business. Her gossip session was interrupted by the gray-haired butler, who looked like he was about to deliver some very formal, non-negotiable news. The butler delivered an urgent summons. His Grace the Duke wanted to talk. Manelli had better pray she hadn't lost his favorite book. Standing before the Grand Duke's bedroom door, Manelli wondered why this meeting wasn't in his less suggestive professional office. She hesitated at the door, realizing that childhood friends visiting each other's bedrooms felt a lot different after a royal-level glow-up. "Your Grace," she asked as she entered, a smile plastered on her face to hide her internal "please don't make this weird" mantra. Setsu was lounging with a book, looking every bit the brooding, handsome protagonist who absolutely knew how to command a room. He greeted her with an incredibly gentle gaze that could probably melt the entire frozen north in a single second. Manelli's inner fangirl was screaming. The Grand Duke's beauty was a direct, targeted assault on her cardiovascular health and logic. Before she could even catch her breath, he was urging her to sit, acting more like an overprotective boyfriend than a tactical strategist. Suddenly, she was being tucked into his personal sofa. A quick sniff confirming the blanket was full of his scent. "Help!" She was ascending. Setsu sat beside her, noting her exhaustion, while Manelli hid under the blanket like a very flustered, pink-haired burrito. She admitted that the heavy ball preparations had finally defeated her stamina and sanity. Staring at the ceiling, she looked forward to the upcoming party, her heart racing faster than a runaway horse on a frozen lake. A gentle hand reached out to touch her hair, sending Manelli's brain into a complete, spark-filled, and costly system failure. Setsu's gaze turned nostalgic as he recalled their childhood, proving even the cold Grand Duke had a soft side. Wrapped in his blanket, Manelli looked back at him, her heart doing flips as she felt the intense gravity of his focused gaze. A memory surfaced, a teary-eyed young Setsu, looking like the saddest, most adorable little future Grand Duke in history. Back in reality, they laughed about how she'd given him a cold as a child, one that had caused a full-blown panic across the estate. In the present, she insisted the Grand Duke couldn't get sick, sounding like the most dedicated, overprotective assistant in history. A mysterious note revealed their childhood illness was actually a blessing, helping them avoid a deadly landslide. Setsu gently stroked her hair again, admitting that even if he could travel through time, his choice would be exactly the same. Surrounded by imaginary flower petals, he confessed that he could never leave her side when she was vulnerable. Cue the romantic palace choir. Manelli mentioned the maids were cleaning his room, her expression turning into a subtle and very suspicious masterpiece of curiosity. The Grand Duke looked genuinely thrown, his hand frozen at his chin as he tried to process her sudden room service update. She explained that the guest got the second-best room because she was a princess, a line of reasoning Setsu was clearly not buying. Setsu responded with dead silence, probably wondering if Manelli was truly the world's most oblivious, self-sabotaging pink-haired wingman. He flatly dismissed her reasoning, as that particular room assignment was apparently both logically and emotionally impossible in his book. Manelli argued back with a fire spirit, proving she was ready to fight for her guest's comfort, which made Setsu show a flash of frustration. Narrator text introduced the pink-haired Princess Canaria, destined to be the Emperor's 12th concubine, which was a nightmare of romantic logic. As a grim, Setsu loomed in the foreground, a pink-haired Manelli fangirled behind him. enjoying the good life. Princess Canaria's eyes widened in surprise as she sat before a clenched, gloved fist, which was definitely not the greeting she'd anticipated. When Setsu suggested notifying the capital, a young and frantic Manelli let out a desperate no. She threw herself at him, tearfully clutching his arm. The pink-haired girl begged him to reconsider, questioning the Grand Duke's legendary memory. The pages of a floating book flipped wildly, signaling a key turn in the story's ever-twisting and dramatic timeline. Manelli looked stressed and wide-eyed, arguing that the princess was still necessary for their grand, complicated plan. The pink-haired girl struck a victory pose, bragging about the fire spirit, while Setsu looked at her like she was a malfunctioning appliance. A rare and devastatingly handsome smile touched Setsu's lips as he admitted his advisor actually had a point. A smooth, gloved hand reached for Manelli's waist, brushing against the cherry-patterned fabric. Surrounded by a flurry of romantic flowers, Setsu gently took Manelli's hand, finally giving the fans the close-up they deserved. The Grand Duke gave a deep bow and a charming compliment that made Manelli blush, claiming she was just being flattered. The pink-haired girl waved a cheerful goodbye and returned to her post, satisfied with a good day's work. Manelli radiated pure joy, surrounded by floral sparkles, as it seemed her matchmaking master plan was proceeding perfectly. An intense close-up on Setsu's gray eyes revealed a man lost in thought, probably calculating his next move. The Grand Duke sat down with a dramatic sweep of his black cloak, commanding the ornate and dimly lit room. A flicker of doubt crossed Setsu's eyes as he admitted he should have known Alcman's sharpest mind wouldn't miss a single detail. An old butler with a monocle entered the room, asking if his master required his professional assistance. Setsu stood with his back to the butler in the shadows, looking like the ultimate brooding protagonist of a tragic story. Setsu demanded to know why Manelli's departure hadn't been reported, his profile sharp against the dark, moody background. Later, Manelli practically sparkled as she entered the office, making her red-haired assistant wonder if someone had spiked the morning tea with a happy potion. The bespectacled assistant was deeply skeptical, having expected a scolding, not a girl radiating pure pink sunshine. Manelli gleefully confirmed she hadn't been scolded, looking like she'd just won the lottery and a lifetime supply of Grand Duke scented blankets. The assistant pushed up her glasses, still skeptical, convinced the Grand Duke's legendary temper should have flared. Manelli defended him with a "he has a gentle heart," a bold claim for a man who commands shadow serpents. She cut the gossip short to focus on work, because apparently even romantic daydreams had to follow a strict palace schedule. A floral system window announced that the original novel's plot was finally starting, and hopefully everyone brought their plot armor and shields. The butler bowed low in apology, reporting that a certain royal guest had made a suspicious, silent, and completely unannounced departure. Huge, inky shadow serpents writhed across the floor, proving the Grand Duke's mood had just plummeted into final boss territory. The butler visibly flinched as the room's atmosphere turned frigid, proving no one wanted to be near a grumpy shadow summoner. As the Grand Duke's fury subsided, the dark energy receded, and the floor and the butler's dignity were spared for now. Standing in the gloom, Setsu radiated a terrifyingly cold aura that promised someone was about to have a very bad week. He demanded to be thankful for Manelli's safety, his eyes turning into icy daggers that looked like they could pierce several layers of armor. The Grand Duke ordered a full investigation into Princess Canaria, showing his protective mode had escalated to full-blown surveillance. A close-up on his face revealed a man who was done playing games and ready to start some serious retribution. When asked about the guest accommodations, he gave Manelli full authority to manage the estate's chaos. He clenched his fist in frustration, hurt that Manelli was pushing him toward another woman like a misguided matchmaker. His gaze hardened with a silent vow. Whatever romantic game she thought she was playing, he wasn't going to follow her script. In a flashback, she and her assistant were busy ordering staff around, turning the courtyard into a whirlwind of productivity. She looked radiant among the rose bushes, a pink-haired vision of competence that had clearly done permanent damage to the Grand Duke's poor heart. A flashback showed a young Setsu kneeling to receive a priest's blessing, praying for the prosperity of the frozen north. Back on a church pew, Manelli watched the adult Setsu, her expression a mix of pride and quiet, enduring affection. The pink-haired girl admitted that this fully grown, powerful Setsu felt like a stranger compared to the fragile boy she knew. The Grand Duke cut an imposing figure in his fur-lined commander's uniform, looking every bit the hero of his own story. As the scene shifted to the capital, Manelli noted that the once fragile Setsu was now ready to face any challenge. Setsu looked down on the kneeling men, cold as ice, while text outlined his grand plans for Alcmin's future. The Grand Duke gripped his long sword, his presence suffocating, and Manelli wondered if she was about to be out of job. The pink-haired girl, looking worried, decided to put her retirement on hold for now. Enjoying the moment, a loud bang echoed through the night sky as brilliant gold fireworks painted dazzling pictures against the darkness. Crowds gathered outside the castle, their eyes glued to a pyrotechnic display more spectacular than any ball. A cheer erupted from the maids and children as the night sky continued to glitter with festive magic. High on a balcony, Manelli watched her masterpiece with stars in her eyes. It was shocking how well it worked. The advisor's wallet wept as she remembered just how much gold she'd just blasted into the sky. It was in a book, I swear. Manelli lied to the bespectacled, red-haired woman, hiding her 21st century pyrotechnic secret. The pink-haired girl rubbed her temples, realizing her past life trivia was getting harder and harder to explain to the locals. A flashback showed a laughing blacksmith who thought Manelli's crazy gunpowder diagrams were the height of artistic expression. Thank goodness. The two women watched as the sky erupted again, one satisfied with the results while the nobles were mesmerized by the lights. The narration hinted that the stage was finally set for a breakthrough. The first act of the legend was about to begin, starring Setsu and the beautiful, golden-haired Canaria in a fateful waltz. Dressed in a gold gown, Canaria sparkled under the chandeliers. Looking completely back in the zone, Manelli was buzzing with excitement, while the red-haired lady stared at her through her glasses, asking why Manelli was acting like the world's most enthusiastic, unpaid matchmaker. Manelli defended her choice with a sheepish smile, insisting Canaria was the perfect, noble guest for their northern domain. Manelli listed off Canaria's stats, arguing the blonde girl was the ultimate upgrade for the Alcmin territory. Her smile faded as she considered the messy political fallout when the powerful giants decided to go to war. The red-haired woman sighed wearily and dropped a truth bomb. Had anyone actually asked the Grand Duke for his opinion? A bead of sweat trickled down Manelli's face as she realized she'd been playing God without reading the instruction manual. The pink-haired girl waved off the warning, choosing optimism despite her friend's prediction of a very painful reality check. What'd go wrong? Manelli asked the heavens, in the classic way that ensures everything will go wrong. Watching the brilliant fireworks bloom in the night sky, Manelli stood in her cyan and purple gown, looking completely mesmerized. A bespectacled, red-haired woman watched from the side, noticing the pink-haired advisor was leaving the celebration. The bespectacled woman wondered why Manelli was skipping the festivities, but the advisor was focused on her own mission. Manelli stood alone in a grand, blue-lit hall, looking like a tiny, sparkling dot in the massive castle architecture. Staring out the window at the deep blue night, the pink-haired girl couldn't help but be reminded of Setsu's eyes. A memory of baby Setsu appeared, looking impossibly beautiful and angelic. He was definitely a heartthrob, even in diapers. Clenched hands and a gentle smile revealed Manelli's deep inner vow as she strolled through the silent, blue-toned hallway. A close-up on her stylish boots with their blue bows emphasized her determination as she swore to make him happy. Manelli looked back with a brilliant smile, her pink hair adorned with white flowers, and offered a formal greeting. Setsu sat majestically, draped in a fur-lined cloak and holding a massive sword, looking every bit the legendary monster of the north. The pink-haired girl looked up in awe, her heart probably skipping a few beats at the Grand Duke's sudden and handsome appearance. As Setsu mused, the narrator wondered if, in another life, the pink-haired girl would have called him father. Details of Manelli's cyan jacket and purple gown showed off her high-quality, noble guest fashion choices. Standing before a massive portrait of the Grand Duke, Manelli promised to find a heroine for him to prevent a tragic ending. Surrounded by roses, the advisor smiled to herself, convinced the Grand Duke would soon find his true happiness. A voice from the shadows called her name, startling Manelli and shattering her quiet reflection and matchmaking plans. Turning toward the mysterious voice, the pink-haired girl looked surprised, her hand raised in a slightly confused gesture. Framed by a decorative border, the adult Setsu appeared in his fur cloak. The Grand Duke offered a rare and gentle smile that could probably cause a minor heat wave in the frozen north. A flash of panic crossed Minelli's eyes as she realized Setsu was supposed to be dancing with Canaria, not loitering in the hallway. A romantic vision showed Setsu dancing with a pink-haired heroine. Wait, was the original story's heroine also pink-haired? Minelli looked completely thrown, internally questioning why the Grand Duke was here instead of on the dance floor. A gloved hand took Minelli's firmly, the sudden physical contact sending the advisor's heart racing like a runaway carriage. The pink-haired girl looked utterly shocked, unable to process that the Grand Duke had chosen to dance with her. Under a canopy of flowers, Setsu swept Minelli into a waltz, creating a moment that defied her own matchmaking plans. Sometime later, Minelli's matchmaker confidence had evaporated, replaced by a look of pure terror. Huddled in a tavern, Minelli frantically explained to the brown-haired Lin that the script of her life had gone off the rails. Lin wore a calm and slightly amused expression, clearly used to his friend high-intensity drama and various world-ending crises. A gorgeous memory of the dance showed Setsu looking far too romantic, proving he was not following the original plot. The advisor buried her face in her hands, groaning that everything was ruined and her perfect plan was in shambles. She questioned why Setsu would ditch the blonde heroine just to find her. Minelli yelled wah and slammed her fists on the table, startling Lin and nearly upending their tavern dinner. Lin suggested that a good drink was the only cure for a matchmaking fail. Minelli leaned in with an intense gaze, asking for Lin's honest opinion, her pink hair catching the light. Blushing like a ripe tomato, Minelli stammered out a question that made the brown-haired man look deeply uncomfortable. A quick shush followed as Lin covered her mouth, begging her not to broadcast her embarrassing thoughts. In a role reversal, Lin was blushing furiously, his eyes darting away from the pink-haired girl's unexpected behavior. Minelli stared at him with a giant question mark over her head, wondering if the beer had already gone to his head. Lin clarified that he'd missed the fireworks because he was busy standing guard like a responsible, non-partying soldier. Minelli blinked in surprise, her brain working overtime to connect the dots of who was where during her panic. Lin tapped the table, explaining that he'd been too busy with security to enjoy the fancy party upstairs. A blush crept up Minelli's cheeks as she remembered the dance she did, in fact, have with the Grand Duke. She took a large gulp from her mug, trying to drown the memory of just how close Setsu had been. She fanned her face to cool down, blaming her current state on the side effects of stress. Lin laughed out loud, finding it hilarious that he was on the same side as this disheveled girl. Lin chuckled to himself, seeming to enjoy the absurdity, while Minelli watched him with quiet, confused curiosity. Surrounded by the floral atmosphere, Lin looked surprisingly handsome for a guy who had just guarded the walls all night. Minelli's matchmaking instincts kicked in again, and she told Lin it was time to settle down and start a family. She lectured him about not breaking hearts, while a beet-red Lin insisted she had completely misunderstood his dealings with the local ladies. The brown-haired man lowered his head, seemingly defeated by Minelli's relentless and unsolicited matchmaking advice. Lin suddenly jumped up, saying, "I should go," and made a hasty retreat before she could find him a bride. Lin ended the tavern talk and played the gentleman, offering to walk Minelli home after a stressful night. Outside, under the moonlight, Minelli dropped the bombshell that she was moving out, citing her outsider status as the main driver for her departure. The brown-haired man looked like he'd seen a ghost, clearly not expecting his favorite advisor to leave the castle. The pink-haired girl stretched towards the night sky, insisting that staying in the castle was bad for her professional image. Lin asked if the boss knew, but Minelli argued that something as minor as moving wasn't worthy of the Grand Duke's schedule. Even with the furniture already arranged in her head, finding a new apartment was still hard, the pink-haired girl sighed. Lin offered his expert advice on real estate, making Minelli wonder if he was being helpful or just trying to dodge guard duty. A sweet thank you followed, proving that even a cranky advisor appreciated a little help from her friends. Minelli returned to the room she once shared with her mother, feeling the weight of the past. The late-night emotions hit, and the pink-haired girl stood alone, contemplating her life choices and her secret moving plans. Suddenly, Setsu appeared from the shadows, looking like the ultimate gloomy nighttime surprise. The Grand Duke questioned why she was lingering at this hour, his presence turning the hallway into a high-stakes standoff. Personal space became a myth as Setsu got close enough to count her eyelashes, surrounded by romantic sparks. The mood shifted when Setsu pointed out she was drunk and smelled like a brewery, which she indignantly denied. Seeing this vulnerable side of him, Manelli realized the powerful Grand Duke was acting just like the clingy little boy she used to know. Setsu used the excuse that his room was too loud, claiming he couldn't sleep in his massive, soundproof ducal chambers. He requested a childhood lullaby, making Manelli wonder if the mighty Grand Duke was having nightmares again. The advisor offered a gentle smile, ready to sing the legendary monster of the North to sleep. Mission failed, as Manelli was the one who ended up fast asleep, slumped on the sofa like a discarded doll. Setsu stood over the sleeping girl in the study, his expression far more contemplative than someone who just wanted to hear a song. The Grand Duke's internal monologue was heavy, processing the news that his favorite advisor was already planning to leave the castle. Standing among the dusty books, Setsu looked as if he was regretting every decision that led to this quiet, lonely moment. Heartbreak hit as he questioned why she was still pulling away despite him, following her how to be a hero manual to the letter. Swirling dark energy filled the screen, matching the Grand Duke's turbulent emotions as the scene faded into moody shadows. The visual transition grew darker, proving that royal angst is the most powerful force in the frozen north. A quick sweep of the castle exterior in the snow marked the passage of time from a dramatic night to morning. Manelli woke with a start, her internal clock screaming because this was definitely not the study sofa she remembered. Confusion took over as she questioned how she had teleported from the study to her own cozy bed overnight. The pink-haired girl stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together blurry fragments of her drunken midnight meeting. A flashback of Setsu's visit and their trip to the study turned her face a bright, embarrassed pink. She concluded it must have been a dream, because the real Setsu would never have let her hair get in such a disastrous state. Her throat was drier than a desert, making her wonder if she'd actually sung a full concert for the Grand Duke. A moment of contemplation revealed that Manelli was still 100% reliving that possibly embarrassing and very vivid dream. Panic ensued when she noticed an unfastened button, prompting the ultimate morning after question. Just how much did she drink? The door creaked open, and the narrator joked that her boozy breath could kill a 1,000-year romance. Back at work, Manelli let out a massive sneeze, proving that late-night waltzes and study naps are bad for your health. Shauna reacted with dramatic horror, as if a single sneeze heralded the start of a castle-wide zombie apocalypse. The pink-haired girl blamed the chill from the outer bailey, suspecting her immune system had finally given up on her. A brief flashback showed a young, adorable Manelli trying to be the most attentive daughter to her mother. Shauna initiated Operation Quarantine, ordering Manelli into isolation, while the advisor argued she had a life to live. Manelli pointed to a mountain of paperwork, trying to use her workload as a shield against a forced nap. Shauna offered a terrifyingly sweet smile, the kind that said she was in charge and Manelli was going to bed. The pink-haired girl trudged away, clutching her documents dejectedly as if walking to her doom. Manelli tried to find a silver lining when the blonde Canaria appeared in the hallway like a sparkling plot device. The camera zoomed in on Canaria, who looked far too perfect to be wandering a cold, drafty castle. Recognizing the VIP female lead, Manelli stopped in her tracks, her matchmaker radar finally back at full power. The detailed shot of Canaria's angelic face proved that main character energy is definitely a visual trait in this world. The blonde beauty remembered the previous assistant and asked for her name, which Manelli provided with a smile. Before social distancing was cool, Manelli warned the heroine to step back, lest she catch her cold. Canaria seemed shocked by the concept of germs, or maybe just surprised that Manelli was so fiercely protective of her health. Pink-haired Manelli smiled serenely, radiating enough positive energy to power a small village, completely unaware of the impending chaos. Her calm was shattered by a sudden, quick reach, causing the advisor to let out a startled yelp. The girl stood confused in a brilliant glow, clutching her documents like a shield and looking like a magical girl without her wand. The blonde Canaria showed off her own special effects, summoning a swirl of flames that would make a professional pyrotechnician jealous. Canaria explained the legendary red opal phoenix, while the pink-haired girl wondered if this was a history lesson or a magic show. The assistant's eyes shone with awe, looking like she'd just witnessed a miracle, or at least a high-budget fantasy sequence. A dramatic portrait of Setsu highlighted his shadow powers, officially crowning him the overpowered protagonist of this magical world. Manelli proudly clutched her stack of paperwork, looking far too happy for someone whose job involved endless, soul-crushing bureaucracy. Disaster struck with a sudden scream as the documents caught fire, while a tiny purple witch mascot watched the literal paperwork bonfire. The charred remains of the documents smoked on the floor, a truly hot off the press moment and an unexpected office bonfire. The two girls huddled on the floor, with Canaria apologizing for her overpowered fire magic, which was meant to cure a common cold. The pink-haired girl smiled and waved it off, claiming that lighting oil lamps often leads to accidental arson. Totally normal behavior. A nostalgic flashback showed her younger self dozing off with a candle, proving she'd been a fire hazard since childhood. The girl rested her chin in her hand, wondering if she'd been sleepwalking through life, which would explain a lot of her chaotic decisions. Canaria looked genuinely impressed, realizing this pink-haired girl handled far more than simple scribe work in this duchy. She proudly held up a complex document explaining that literacy was standard issue in alchemy. Who needs a library card when you have survival skills? Canaria revealed she helped establish the first school for commoners, proving she was more than just a pretty face, but a literal architect of education. Manelli looked thrilled, as if she'd found her intellectual soulmate, or at least someone who appreciated a good syllabus. The blonde heroine offered a simple apology, her expression softening as she realized she might have underestimated her new friend's intellect. The girl humbly downplayed her genius, admitting she was just a commoner who happened to be a math prodigy from birth. Canaria's jaw nearly hit the floor, unable to comprehend someone mastering arithmetic without formal, expensive tutors and 3 degrees. Manelli dropped a total mood killer, revealing her plan to resign as soon as the Grand Duke finally found a wife. The blonde woman looked shocked by the news, her face reflecting the sudden weight of this unexpected and very awkward revelation. A heavy silence filled the air, making the room feel more awkward than a family dinner where someone brings up politics. A loud bang announced the Grand Duke's return, breaking the tension with some much-needed royal drama. Mentioning the local monster problem, the pink-haired girl explained why the Grand Duke spent his weekends hunting instead of having brunch. A detailed map showed Alchemind's double-walled defense system, designed to keep monsters out and citizens mostly intact. Canaria looked genuinely sad, reflecting on how much pressure the young Grand Duke carried on his monster-fighting shoulders every day. Realizing she was too busy fangirling over the blonde beauty to focus, the advisor felt ashamed of her fangirl behavior. Canaria's expression was filled with concern as she realized she was already worried about a Grand Duke she barely even knew. She invited the pink-haired girl to greet the returning hero, turning a simple homecoming into a potentially very awkward double date. The girl gave a playful wink, claiming she was cured by Canaria's kindness, proving that optimism was her only actual superpower. Surrounded by blooming roses, the blonde heroine looked like she'd stepped off a romance novel cover, just missing a brooding hero. A flashback showed Canaria with her father, the king, from a more formal time with significantly fewer arson incidents. She looked effortlessly elegant, fixing her hair, unaware she was about to be auctioned off to the highest imperial bidder. A golden edict from the emperor arrived, demanding she become his 12th concubine, the royal version of swipe left. Facing her father's back, Canaria refused to be wife number 12 in some old man's crowded harem. Canaria's inner monologue screamed in defiance of being caged, insisting she was born for more than life in a gilded cage. Her father, the king, turned with an icy glare, dismissing her desire for independence as a foolish dream. He lectured her on the proper life of a princess, which apparently involved zero freedom and 100% political bargaining chip value. Canaria looked utterly devastated, realizing her childhood home was no longer a sanctuary, but a better decorated prison. Despite her hopes that her father would choose her over war, he didn't hesitate to push her into the Emperor's arms. Under the cover of shadows and moonlight, the princess prepared for a desperate escape, choosing an unknown future over royal submission. She fled into the night, heading for the Alchemid Dominion, where even the Emperor's long reach couldn't touch her. Her final thought was one of pure defiance. Anything was better than being a trophy for a man who collected concubines like stamps. The blonde runaway looked to the horizon with new resolve, ready to write her own script, starting with her arrival in Alchemid. The grand, empty bedroom was ready, a silent testament to the luxurious life she'd abandoned for a shot at real freedom. Canaria offered a polite smile and a thank you, though the atmosphere in the palace remained distinctly stiff. The trio of maids stared back, with glares sharp enough to boil tea with a single look. The blonde beauty looked distressed, realizing that royal life involved a lot more scrutinizing gazes than she'd anticipated. Canaria wondered if she'd accidentally become the homewrecker in someone else's carefully constructed fairy tale. Her internal monologue went into overdrive, questioning who really held the title of the Grand Duke's chosen one. Meanwhile, Manelli was radiating joy, completely unaware that her career and possibly her life was about to get complicated. Setsu returned from his hunt, leading a small army and looking like a man who'd just conquered an expensive brunch. The Grand Duke looked effortlessly cool in his fur-lined cloak, reminding everyone why he was the main character of this show. "You're back, Your Grace," Manelli chirped, joining Canaria in her best "I definitely didn't burn anything down today" greeting. Setsu skipped the pleasantries, immediately suspicious as to why his favorite paper pusher and the princess were suddenly best friends. Manelli explained with wide, innocent eyes that she was just tutoring the future Grand Duchess on local Alchemid politics. Canaria suddenly pointed at Manelli and issued a devastating order, demanding that Setsu fire his assistant immediately, while Manelli experienced a total brain freeze. The sudden betrayal made the room feel colder than a winter wind, leaving everyone wondering where this hostility came from. Setsu remained silent, his stony gaze suggesting he was mentally calculating how much paperwork he'd have to do without an assistant. Canaria doubled down, accusing Manelli of leaking sensitive state secrets to a complete stranger without a second thought. She lamented that the pink-haired girl had spoken of Alchemid's situation as if she were reading from a public gossip column. Canaria looked genuinely appalled, questioning if an assistant who couldn't keep a secret could be trusted with royal administrative duties. A bead of sweat trickled down Manelli's face as she realized her friendly tour was actually a major security breach. Setsu turned to his assistant for the truth, while Manelli stammered like a broken record. Her heart sank to her stomach, realizing that in this castle, honesty could be a very expensive policy. She reflected on her status as a mere lucky commoner, reminding herself that golden opportunities could vanish in an instant. A tender memory of her childhood with Lin highlighted a simpler time, when social status didn't involve heated accusations. Manelli accepted her fate with a look of dejection, admitting she was never cut out for this high-stakes aristocratic life. Lin looked genuinely concerned, reaching out as if to catch her shattering career. Manelli tried to frame the 5-day suspension as a paid vacation, proving she was the undisputed queen of toxic positivity. Lin was confused by her lack of anger, but she insisted the suspension was all her own fault. The pink-haired girl forced a smile, masking her heartbreak with a performance worthy of a local theater award. Canaria watched with a sharp, calculating gaze, perhaps realizing her rival was really just a very confused optimist. Lin wondered if Manelli was testing him, while she let out a frustrated sigh at the whole awkward situation. Suddenly, the knight invited Manelli to his home, essentially proposing a meet-the-parents sympathy date. Manelli blinked in confusion, her brain processing the invitation at dial-up speed. A blushing Lin explained that his parents might have some leads on a new job, one that wouldn't be so life-threatening. Worried he was coming on too strong, the poor guy started backpedaling so fast he could have time traveled. A genuinely sweet smile finally returned to Manelli's face, showing she actually appreciated his clumsy but kind gesture. Lin looked like he'd won the lottery, his face lighting up with a glow that could rival the sun. Despite just inviting his crush over, the knight puffed out his chest, blushing like a hero. Manelli packed her bags to leave the inner city, clutching a white cloth like a temporary flag of surrender. She dragged her suitcase towards the exit, a lone, pink-haired fugitive escaping the high-stakes drama of the Grand Duke's court. She paused at the door, looking back with a soft, melancholic expression, already missing the chaos she'd just escaped. She wondered if Setsu could handle his nightmares without her, proving her maternal instincts were a permanent job requirement. The scene returned to the present, with the pink-haired girl working diligently at a desk that was, surprisingly, not on fire. She wrote a heartfelt letter, deciding to treat her current situation as a much-needed vacation from her usual chaotic life. A close-up on blue eyes suggested the pink-haired woman was in a moment of deep, potentially plot-altering contemplation. Arriving at Lin's doorstep, Manelli called out for his mother, ready to trade royal documents for some home-cooked comfort. Three messy kids burst out screaming that their big brother had finally brought a girlfriend home for the family interrogation. Lin desperately tried to control the little mob, insisting she was just a friend as his ears turned bright red. A kind-eyed man with short hair appeared, watching the comedic chaos with a knowing, fatherly smirk. He told her to skip the formalities and just call him uncle, which was basically a verbal welcome to the family hug. A grim reminder noted that Lin's father had sacrificed his right arm to a monster, ending his career as captain of the guard. Despite his injury, the former captain warmly invited her inside, proving that hospitality was Alchemind's strongest defense. The kids weren't giving up, dragging Lin's mother into the hallway to announce that the marriage prospect had finally arrived. Lin's mother offered a gentle, welcoming smile, looking like she was already planning the wedding guest list in her head. Manelli introduced herself as Advisor Baba, but the mother already knew exactly who she was and was clearly a fan. Lin's mother was overjoyed, her eyes sparkling with the kind of joy only a potential mother-in-law can feel. Lin stammered out a denial, while his mother playfully teased him for his shyness, basically planning the wedding in her head. The house was a whirlwind of domestic chaos, but Lin's family made the crowded kitchen feel like a warm hug. Manelli sipped her tea with a bewildered expression, feeling like a pink fish out of water and into a very cozy domestic life. She explained her plans for independence, citing Canaria's arrival as the perfect excuse to finally move out of the castle. Lin's parents exchanged a deeply confused look, wondering why anyone would want to leave the fine dining of the court. Manelli asked with a polite smile if her desire to start over outside the walls was really that shocking. She reflected on how Canaria's presence highlighted her awkward role in the castle, proving that 3 was indeed a crowd. The pink-haired advisor clutched her teacup, ready for a life of independence away from royal drama and judgmental princesses. Lin's mother offered a supportive smile, welcoming her to stay for 5 days and promising to help her find a new home. Lin looked unusually pensive, his blush suggesting he was running some internal, emotional calculations involving his favorite advisor. Manelli admitted she was a disaster in the kitchen, but the mother insisted that Advisor Bava was known for her sharp mind. Night fell over the quiet house, bringing a touch of sweetness and a rare night free from castle noise. Manelli watched the little girl fall asleep, her maternal instincts kicking in as soft snores filled the room. She marveled at the child's porcelain-perfect skin, wondering if all children were naturally this photogenic or just this one. Giving in to the cuteness overload, she poked the girl's cheek, confirming that human children were, in fact, adorable when quiet. Manelli sat by the bed, gazing at the moonlight, finally enjoying a moment of true peace. Despite the comfort, she felt a pang of boredom, like wearing a sweater that was warm but didn't quite fit. Suddenly, a strange feeling washed over her, her eyes widening as she sensed something lurking in the shadows. A dark, serpentine shadow slithered across the room, causing the pink-haired girl to let out a gasp. The child woke up groggily, asking what was wrong, while Manelli wondered if she was hallucinating from too much domestic bliss. Morning light shone on the grand castle, a cruel reminder of the high-stakes world Manelli had left for 5 days. The sound of boots on a rug was heard, as Lin noted that his family had, shockingly, fallen head over heels for his friend. Lin reported to the Grand Duke, admitting he was genuinely surprised she'd agreed to come home with him. A close-up on the knight's purple eyes suggested he was hiding some secrets or just a very intense crush. A flashback showed a young Lin calling out to Manelli, proving their bond went all the way back to their playground days. Little Lin spotted a little Manelli in a fluffy green dress, a childhood memory that clearly still occupied his mind. He watched as little Manelli laughed with a dark-haired boy, presumably a young Setsu, making him look like the ultimate third wheel. The memory of the trio highlighted the long-standing dynamic between the knight, the advisor, and their stoic Grand Duke. Setsu's voice echoed down the hall, pulling Lin back to the present, where he was addressing the loyal knight. Setsu stood among white roses, the picture of a brooding Grand Duke and the very definition of tall, dark, and complicated. He refused to speak of any debts, insisting their relationship was built on something deeper than mere political favors. Setsu observed an ominous, crimson shadow coiling around Lin, wondering if Manelli was completely unaware of the danger. A gentle vision of a smiling Manelli suggested that even the cold Grand Duke had a soft spot for his favorite pink-haired troublemaker. Lin looked ahead with new resolve, convinced he still had a shot at the ultimate prize. Manelli's heart. Setsu looked genuinely surprised, perhaps realizing his knight was more of a romantic rival than he'd thought. The two men faced off in the hall, proving the original script was still in play. Lin mentally declared emotional war on the Grand Duke, vowing he would not back down when it came to love. On the third morning at the house, the sun rose, and the real bake-off was about to begin. Manelli wrestled with a giant blob of dough, discovering that bread making was a full-body workout she never signed up for. Lin's mother cheered her on, while Manelli realized her sharp mind was currently being defeated by some sticky flour. The secret family stew recipe was finally revealed, a highly exclusive ritual that probably required a secret handshake and an apron. Manelli, eager to prove she wasn't a total kitchen disaster, psyched herself up for the culinary challenge of a lifetime. She asked about the main ingredient, only to learn that the catch of the day was a wild rabbit. The reality of butchering a fluffy little bunny hit Manelli like a ton of bricks, turning her kitchen confidence into pure horror. She collapsed on the floor in culinary despair, realizing that beginner cooking didn't usually involve taxidermy skills. A cartoon rabbit ghost waved a sassy goodbye, leaving the house for a less stew-like afterlife. Manelli pivoted to childcare, helping one of Lin's younger brothers get dressed, while the Purple Witch girl offered some meta-commentary. She focused on the task at hand, proving that dressing a small child was much easier than butchering a rabbit. The kid dropped a bombshell, asking if she heard wedding bells, causing poor Manelli to short-circuit and go completely silent. Lin tried to explain he was just hungry, while his brothers mercilessly teased him about finally getting married. A protective little sister declared Manelli was hers and hers alone, effectively starting a sister custody battle in the study. Manelli was mortified when the girl claimed they shared a bed, feeling like she'd become personal property. Winter's sun fell on the cozy manor as a voice announced it was finally time to eat. A table of steaming stew, mussels, and cider was laid out, looking better than any fine dining at the palace. Watching the kids eat, Manelli realized that managing children required more stamina than a marathon through the desert. She stared at the roast, silently admitting her administrative skills did not translate to rabbit carving. The dinner table descended into pure, unadulterated chaos, leaving poor Lin shouting for order in his own home. The pink-haired girl walked through the snow carrying a bucket, enjoying a moment of cold, authentic family life. Lin joined her as she wondered if she really had the survival skills needed for independent living. Manelli complimented his adorable siblings, but Lin just felt guilty for making her endure his family's chaos. The knight praised her natural maternal glow, while he lamented that all he knew how to do was yell. Manelli proudly recalled being Setsu's original partner in crime, enjoying a momentary ego boost. A sudden, earth-shattering realization hit her, her eyes widening as the pieces of the past finally clicked into place. Looking at the empty cradle, all the clues connected, and she realized this Grand Duke had been by her side since infancy. A heartwarming memory revealed baby Setsu and baby Manelli, proving their childhood friend relationship was deeply ingrained. Little Setsu revealed a toothless, gummy smile. This proved that before he became broody, he too was a little ray of sunshine. Back in the snow, Manelli laughed to cover her slip-up, hoping Lin hadn't noticed her internal existential crisis. Lin, assuming she was just stressed about her suspension, completely missed the romantic awakening she'd just had. He looked at the bucket, sincerely thanking his friend for getting along so well with his family. Lin averted his gaze, his voice dropping low as he prepared to deliver a speech that would most likely end in a confession. The air was thick with romantic tension as the knight prepared to declare who held his heart. With a whoosh, a magical blue vortex erupted out of thin air, rudely interrupting a moment that was about to get very dramatic. As the blizzard and magic intertwined, Manelli shielded her eyes from a sight that looked straight out of a disaster movie. As the light faded, she wondered aloud if the weather or the local magic had just had a mental breakdown. Lin agreed with her assessment, both of them standing dumbfounded in the aftermath of the strange blue phenomenon. Noticing a leaf in his hair, Manelli reached out and gently plucked it off, a tender gesture that absolutely flustered the poor knight. They were so close, the intimate proximity turning the snowy air into a silent shyness between them. Lin stared at her, his gaze so intense it seemed he was either deeply in love or calculating his next move. Their feet still stuck in the snow. They were frozen in a moment where neither knew who should speak first. Manelli requested a walk alone to clear her head, and Lin politely stepped back, giving his crush some much-needed space. The knight headed toward the manor with the water buckets, leaving the pink-haired girl alone with her thoughts. Standing in the winter chill, she wondered how she could have been so blind to the feelings that were taking root. She reflected on the exact moment her heart went haywire, realizing her feelings ran deeper than she had anticipated. Overwhelmed by her own discovery, Manelli covered her face with her hands, hoping the white snow could cool her blush. A tall, dark figure appeared in the distance, his presence instantly turning the silent forest into a high-stakes royal meeting. She gasped in surprise. She turned to find Grand Duke Setsu himself standing right behind her. The dark-haired man looked down at her, his noble cloak and icy gaze making him look like a winter god. They faced off in the snow, the advisor and the Grand Duke finally meeting far from the castle walls. Setsu looked unusually serious, his expression suggesting he wasn't just here to admire the winter scenery. Manelli argued that his presence was inappropriate, worried his blatant favoritism would cause gossip among the staff. The Grand Duke looked offended, asking if she truly thought his personal visit was beneath his royal dignity. She insisted that a humble commoner like her wasn't worth his time, claiming his true happiness lay elsewhere. Setsu's gloved hand reached out to brush her cheek, silencing her protests with a heart-stopping gesture. He questioned her assumption, asking who exactly told her his happiness was somewhere else. With a pained look, Setsu confessed that he was in agony simply because she wasn't at the castle. Manelli stared at him, her brain short-circuiting from the cold Grand Duke's game-changing confession. He admitted he had made a terrible mistake, his regret as visible as the white puffs of his breath in the cold. Manelli pointed out that she was still technically on suspension and had 2 more days before she could return to the castle. They stood together in the quietly falling snow, 2 people trapped by royal duty and extremely complicated feelings. Setsu gazed into the distance, his melancholic profile a perfect match for the icy landscape behind him. Manelli stared blankly, her inner monologue fading as she struggled to process her increasingly chaotic love life. The pink-haired girl looked utterly defeated, the pained expression on her face saying she'd rather be anywhere but in this snowy mess. After firmly telling the Grand Duke to get lost for 2 days, Manelli wondered if her social skills were officially broken. She stared into the void, coming to the scientific conclusion that her life had become an absolute, total disaster zone. Her hands clenched her dress as she realized leaving the castle hadn't deterred the Grand Duke at all. After a restless, sleepless night, Manelli treated her breakfast roll as a weary consolation prize. Poking at the bread, she had a mid-meal epiphany about why the Grand Duke had suddenly taken up residence in her heart. Lin burst in with equally sleep-deprived energy, suggesting a casual walk to lighten the mood. He proposed a local tour before they headed back, while Manelli clutched her bun like a shield against more dramatic revelations. Lin's younger siblings peeked from the doorway, looking ready to charge admission for the romantic comedy about to unfold. Standing in the snow, Lin grandly presented a house, looking like a real estate agent about to close a deal. With a satisfyingly crisp click of the doorknob, Lin explained that the owner was away, making it the perfect getaway spot. When Manelli heard the rent was cheap, and the location was Grand Duke free, she lit up like a Christmas tree. The cozy, sunlit interior looked far more inviting than the cold castle walls she faced daily. Overcome with domestic joy, the pink-haired girl practically lunged at a chair, having finally found a piece of furniture she genuinely loved. Discovering it was fully furnished was the win she desperately needed, though Lin looked a little concerned. She beamed at her knight with a look of gratitude, officially crowning him the MVP of her house-hunting journey. Lin returned the look with pure, unadulterated adoration that could probably melt all the snow in the kingdom. He encouraged her independence, though his supportive tone carried the weight of a man about to drop another heavy truth. Heavy footsteps sounded as Lin turned serious, lowering his voice to ask for a moment of her time. Her fingers clutched her cuffs as she pleaded with him for time to sort out her panicked thoughts. The brown-haired man offered a gentle, understanding smile, proving he had more patience than your average broody male lead. Wrapped in her winter hood, Manelli offered Lin a silent apology, her guilt rising faster than the morning sun. The sudden arrival of an army turned the quiet morning into a military parade, complete with red banners and very intimidating armor. Hiding in her fur-lined cloak, Manelli prepared her best. I'm just a civilian face for the incoming VIPs. A gloved hand reached out with a casual greeting, rudely interrupting her attempt to remain incognito in the snow. Manelli introduced herself with formal, administrative precision, only to find this newcomer was playing a completely different social game. After being addressed as ma'am, she fumed internally, wondering if her official title was written in invisible ink this morning. The man revealed himself to be a pink-haired charmer with a fur collar and dangerously arrogant violet eyes. Manelli stared, thinking he looked less like royalty and more like a guy who belonged on a tropical beach. Her brain short-circuited when he flirtatiously planted a bold kiss on the back of her hand with a chew sound. With a playful wink, the stranger declared them soulmates, officially entering the running for the Most Shameless Man award. Our heroine wondered which dimension this lunatic crawled out of and why he was now harassing her at the local castle entrance. He struck a pose that screamed, "I'm beautiful and I know it," completely ignoring her obvious social discomfort. She threw up the universal "get away from me" hand gesture, reminding him that familiarity is usually earned, not handed out like a flyer. Labeling him a nameless passerby, she planned to banish him immediately before he did any more damage to her sanity. The man skipped formal titles entirely, suggesting Big Brother as a cozy alternative to his actual royal rank. Manelli's brain suffered a critical error, her jaw dropping as she tried to process the sheer audacity of this man. He insisted there was no pressure, egging her on to try the nickname, as if it were a completely normal social request. He doubled down on the Big Brother title, while a chibi Manelli screamed that she was a proud and very annoyed only child. He switched to calling himself Josh, but Manelli was already done with this conversation, begging him to just take no for an answer with some dignity. He let out a light-hearted huff and finally relented, agreeing to stick to first names for now. Realizing he was the crown prince, Manelli narrowed her eyes, determined to find a loophole to kick him out immediately. She brandished an official-looking document, trying to play the no-entry card by citing administrative difficulties with his royal pass. Josh dropped the ultimate bombshell. He would only stay if she agreed to be his personal shadow during his visit. Her eyes widened like saucers, her soul nearly leaving her body at the thought of working overtime with a lunatic. When she asked about his actual mission, the prince just shrugged, proving that work-life balance is easy when you're royalty. Manelli silently gaped in disbelief, officially realizing that the Grand Duke was actually the normal one in this story. The scene cut back to a grand, sunlit hall as the narrator prepared to explain how this disaster officially began. Josh casually announced he'd brought a guest to the castle, while Manelli looked like she needed a permanent vacation. Fearing the chaos that pink hair brought, Manelli silently prayed for Setsu to kick this arrogant newcomer out. In the grand throne room, Setsu demanded to know the stranger's name, as if he were interviewing for the role of a villain. Setsu grew territorial, asking why the Marquis was staring at his favorite advisor instead of focusing on royal affairs. A chibi Manelli cheered from the sidelines, glad to see her Grand Duke was finally putting his broody energy to good use. Josh dropped the bold confession that he simply took a liking to the young lady, leaving Manelli completely stunned. As Setsu blocked the view with an icy and narrowed glare, the tension skyrocketed. The Grand Duke threatened to have the Marquis expelled for his blatant lack of decorum. Josh countered with a political nuke, warning that kicking him out would trigger a full-scale invasion from the capital's army. As the threat of war loomed, Manelli panicked, her social anxiety suddenly escalating into a potential national crisis. She watched the two powerful men face off, feeling like a prize in a game she never signed up for. Setsu coldly called the bluff, telling Josh to get lost with his princess, much to Manelli's horror. Manelli broke into a cold sweat, realizing that if the Marquis left, her peaceful castle life might go with him. Josh crossed his arms and challenged the Grand Duke's authority, asking if he was questioning the princess's authenticity, using administrative doubt as a shield to stay where he wasn't wanted. Josh threw in another cheeky wink, proposing a deal to stay at the castle for a while. A chibi Manelli was vaguely struck by lightning, realizing this pink-haired menace was officially moving in. Josh upped the pressure, implying he might go over Setsu's head to the Emperor. Setsu conceded it was an interesting proposal, his mind likely calculating 12 different ways to end the conversation. The Grand Duke fell into a deep, broody silence, looking like he was trying to find a way out of this farce. Manelli stared blankly, waiting for her boss to say something, anything that didn't involve inviting the lunatic. Inside, she watched Setsu with concern, wondering if his brain had short-circuited under the weight of the Marquis's audacity. Josh held out a hand for a shake, packaging his unwelcome intrusion as a cultural exchange with the South. A powerful, bone-crushing handshake sealed the deal, with Setsu reluctantly agreeing to let the Marquis stay. Josh promised to reward the Grand Duke's hospitality handsomely, as soon as he found the mysterious thing he was looking for. Manelli watched them from the shadows, her inner detective wondering what on earth could be worth all this trouble. Late at night, a sleep-deprived Setsu rubbed his temples, wishing Manelli would stop her nightly serenade. He recalled an image of Manelli smiling brightly among the flowers, proving she occupied his mind even in his sleep. In the darkness, the Grand Duke looked pained and lonely, his broodiness meter turned up to 11. Staring out at the moonlit castle, Setsu desperately begged for Manelli to return and end his silent, snowy suffering. Back in reality, a confused maid asked about guest room assignments, realizing the castle was about to get crowded. A servant reported the guest's strange request to set up a tent in the garden, adding glamping to the castle's list of problems. Manelli went into administrative mode, ordering a banquet and treating this chaotic arrival like a high-stakes dinner party. She ordered the staff to investigate the tent request, provide housing, and confiscate all weapons for safety. The staff saluted their efficient advisor, confirming the arrangements were made with her in full command. Manelli tasked a bespectacled assistant with digging up dirt on Marquis Brailer, officially beginning her counterintelligence mission. Furious at the Marquis's arrogance, she was determined to take him down a peg for acting so entitled in front of Setsu. In a flashback, Josh explained with a wink why he didn't use honorifics, proving his arrogance was a consistent personality trait. Manelli reflected on the rarity of pink hair, finding it suspicious that the Marquis wasn't surprised by her appearance. Pondering the connection to the South, she wondered if her mysterious father was actually from the Marquis's homeland. She quickly dismissed the identity crisis, deciding her family history was a problem for her. Another day, she ran off as a chibi afterimage, declaring that modern society was too busy for these complicated romantic subplots. The red-haired assistant returned with a folder full of secrets, having successfully completed her background check. Manelli reviewed the report, her serious expression suggesting there was more to this Marquis than just a pretty face. Her jaw dropped in surprise as she discovered the Marquis's true identity was far more than she had bargained for. A grand crest revealed the truth. The pink-haired nuisance was actually Admiral Josh Pasa, a high-ranking power player. Manelli processed the intel that Admiral Pasa practically ruled the South, realizing he was a much bigger political figure than she'd anticipated. Manelli let out a weary, disbelieving sigh, feeling the weight of the Marquis's status as the red-haired assistant stood by. She mulled over how the Crown Prince was the intended guest in the original story, wondering what cosmic error brought this pink-haired chaos. As a substitute, recalling their meeting, Setsu and Josh sealed their reluctant pact with a handshake, the Marquis promising a generous reward for his discovery. Manelli questioned the vague reward just as a blonde princess glided into view, clearly ready to add more drama to the day. A close-up of a newcomer's ornate purple and gold dress revealed a royal who had clearly brought her entire court wardrobe to the north. The blonde princess questioned the timing of the door opening, catching Manelli off guard with her sharp, noble aura. When the princess offered to greet the guests, Manelli made a swift exit to escape the uncomfortable social trap, using banquet preparations as an excuse. Manelli walked away, but the blonde princess followed close behind, much to the red-haired assistant's concern for the impending clash of egos. The newcomer's ornate purple and gold dress and sharp gaze suggested the arrival of a royal who was clearly well-informed about the castle's happenings. The blonde princess swept her gaze across the hall with a superior air, as if assessing whether the place was worthy of her presence. The princess observed that Manelli seemed to be a very important figure in the castle, likely sizing up her competition for power. Manelli played it cool, but internally suspected she had just become public enemy number one for this new blonde royal. The princess insisted on helping, though Manelli suggested she'd be better off getting ready for the banquet she was supposedly so excited about. The princess claimed to hate extravagance and wondered if Setsu would even attend, hinting at his usual antisocial habits. To get under Manelli's skin, Manelli's mind flashed back to her moonlit encounter with Setsu, questioning if that one night had broken the story's original timeline for good. Manelli complained of a splitting headache, realizing that as the plot went off the rails, the narrative distortion was literally starting to hurt her brain. Manelli stumbled down the hallway while the princess offered some unsolicited decorating advice about using blue stardust on the castle walls. A wave of dizziness hit, and Manelli nearly fainted, her world spinning faster than the princess's confusing and manipulative royal schemes. A sudden, strong hand grabbed Manelli's shoulder, and she let out a pained ache as she narrowly avoided a faceplant on the red carpet. Josh appeared with a playful wink and a greeting, proving he had a sixth sense for catching pretty, near-fainting castle administrators. The blonde princess demanded to know who this man was, but Josh shut her down with a casual, dismissive coolness. Sparks flew as the princess gritted her teeth, clearly not used to being treated like an uninvited background character by a stranger. After being accused of being rude, Josh noted that the princess was practically one of the family, unintentionally triggering a royal meltdown. The princess stormed off, leaving a very confused Manelli to wonder why the hallway had suddenly become a social battlefield. Josh, baffled by the drama, asked Manelli why the princess would be so offended by a perfectly normal family analogy. Josh flashed a brilliant smile, doubling down on the "we look like a family" line to Manelli's growing social and emotional exhaustion. He declared that because their hair colors matched, they were destined to be together, officially winning the most persistent and shameless flirt award. Manelli offered a polite thank you for catching her, though she was clearly reconsidering her no-weapons policy for the Marquis. Set against a backdrop of roses, Josh radiated smug satisfaction, fully aware that his charm was a dangerously tactical weapon of mass distraction. Manelli acknowledged he was undeniably handsome, but was baffled by his poor ability to handle simple conversations, especially with actual princesses. Walking together, Josh lamented how frustrating it was when people didn't understand his simple yet incredibly annoying personality. Josh claimed he sensed an aura of fire from the princess, suspecting she might be a spy from a rival kingdom. Manelli dismissed his fire-sensing abilities as complete nonsense, insisting the only thing she smelled was a fresh bouquet of freesias. She asked why he didn't just send the princess back to the capital, clearly hoping to export this royal drama as soon as possible. Josh refused to leave before trying the northern food, prompting Manelli to question if the Admiral ever actually did any work. Defending his honor, Josh insisted he was a workaholic, though his current northern vacation vibe suggested he was just playing hooky. The scene cut to a southern port, where Admiral Pasa supposedly spent his time securing trade and commerce routes. His job apparently involved hunting pirates and stopping illegal trade, which sounded far more productive than his current flirtation marathon with Manelli. Manelli scoffed at the idea of him being a serious lawman, finding his tall tales of pirate hunting completely and utterly impossible. Sweating under the pressure, Manelli realized Josh's gaze was surprisingly sharp for a man who acted like a professional. Pink-haired beach bum. When Josh asked what was wrong, Manelli lied, claiming she was just conducting a very thorough inspection of his character design. She realized she might have misjudged the Marquis, while Josh watched her with a hint of focused suspicion. A close-up on Josh's face revealed a level of handsomeness that was frankly illegal for a supporting character. Manelli questioned why a side character in her life had to be this good-looking, struggling to maintain a professional, administrative distance from him. She noted his smooth, dark skin and handsome features, confirming he was definitely not from these snowy, pale-skinned northern parts. Manelli stared at his double eyelids and surprisingly delicate eyelashes, her inner monologue officially entering the dangerously smitten zone. Josh caught her staring and gave a knowing smirk, clearly enjoying the effect his high stat point visuals were having on her. Noting their matching hair color, she admitted the Marquis was surprisingly handsome, though her brain refused to enjoy it. He asked if she looked like her father, a question that sent Manelli's inner monologue into a confused spiral. A tiny purple witch waved, appearing as a cheerful promotional interlude. He dropped the final bombshell in this heavy royal drama, suggesting she must look like her father, implying a family connection she hadn't anticipated. Josh walked away with a mysterious, satisfied smile, leaving a stunned Manelli in the hallway with 1,000 new questions. Josh wondered about his parentage, while Manelli questioned the logic of him guessing about a mother he apparently knew. Manelli revealed she grew up alone and had never seen her father's face, which made family tree day at school rather awkward. She credited her survival in the north to the late Grand Duke, walking down the corridors of her sanctuary. Josh asked why she didn't just ask her mother now, proving that Admiral-level logic is sometimes just basic common sense. Sensing he'd hit a sore spot, Josh offered a sincere apology for his thoughtless remark about her orphan status. Josh took her hand, sympathizing with her difficult upbringing, clearly overestimating the tragedy of a life without a deadbeat dad. Manelli offered a gentle smile, insisting she never felt lonely thanks to the kindness of her childhood benefactor. A heartwarming memory showed a young Manelli and her mother, remembering how Setsu had provided them with a comfortable life. A young Setsu appeared in her memory, a noble boy who showed unexpected and enduring kindness to a commoner girl. Josh suggested the missing father might be a hidden nobleman, promising an instant status reversal, like a royal lottery ticket. Manelli rejected the idea, seeing a deadbeat dad as a burden, not a blessing. Josh finally got the picture. Standing before heavy doors, Manelli wondered if she should even care about a man she'd never met. The staff swarmed in with questions about the banquet, proving that not even an inner monologue is safe from the demands of castle administration. The red-haired assistant startled Manelli, cutting through the administrative noise to pull her away for an urgent matter. Ignoring Manelli's frantic questions about fires or food, the assistant insisted she follow her for a serious emergency. The emergency was a gorgeous blue dress in the storage room, which had belonged to the late Grand Duchess herself. The assistant demanded Manelli dress up so people wouldn't underestimate her gentle face. It was time for a power makeover. Realizing the assistant was fuming over Princess Canaria's attitude, Manelli found the red-haired girl's loyalty both adorable and terrifying. The assistant complained about the princess's arrogance, while a chibi version questioned why a guest on probation was being so bossy. Manelli burst out laughing, finding the assistant's fierce protectiveness far more entertaining than any actual royal drama. The red-haired assistant noted that Manelli wasn't usually one to let rudeness slide, pushing for a fashionable revenge. Reflecting on her high expectations for the original story, Manelli realized real life was far messier than than any novel. She recalled Canaria's perfect setup, wondering if the story's destined romance was just a plot point she could ignore. Standing by the dress, the assistant offered surprisingly deep advice. People don't always fit together as perfectly as furniture. Manelli realized she'd been too busy trying to act out a script instead of living her own life. She announced that she was done playing a supporting role. This world wasn't just a novel anymore, and it was time to start writing her own chapters. Surrounded by flowers, a brightly smiling Manelli thanked her assistant for the much-needed reality check and the gorgeous dress. Sudden maid attack. Two staff members grabbed Manelli, ready to unleash their pent-up fashion sense on their unsuspecting boss. The maids demanded complete trust, while Manelli looked like she was about to be abducted by a very enthusiastic styling squad. It turned out the staff had been dying to give her a style makeover for ages, much to the detriment of her administrative pride. They dragged her into the dressing room, while the red-haired assistant watched the fashion abduction with professional satisfaction. As the setting sun painted the sky, the castle prepared for a night that was absolutely going to break the original story's rhythm. In the moonlight, the Grand Duchess's dress shimmered with a magical glow, heralding a very successful makeover. Setsu stood tall in his dark uniform, looking every bit the broody male lead he was born to be. Manelli arrived in the blue dress, looking absolutely regal. The transformation was so successful, it could be considered a tactical advantage. A gloved hand was offered, a classic "will you dance" move carrying enough romantic tension to power the castle. Setsu asked if she still intended to refuse his hand, his gaze as intense as a final exam she hadn't studied for. Manelli looked completely stunned, realizing the cold Grand Duke was actually making a very public, very bold romantic move. He held his ground, waiting for her answer, while the entire room likely held its breath in the background. Princess Canaria watched their interaction, her silent observation suggesting an extremely complex, triangular social disaster was brewing. The three formed a tense front of fashion and high-risk triangulation, proving that the dinner party had officially devolved into a battlefield. Across the room, Princess Canaria formally apologized to Setsu, desperately trying to salvage her royal reputation. Watching them, Manelli's thoughts drifted back to Setsu, a man who was definitely not acting according to her internal script. Canaria begged for forgiveness, her previous arrogance replaced by a plea, hoping Setsu would stop being so harsh with her. The princess reached out to touch his chest, attempting a classic romantic gesture, but Setsu was clearly not receptive. Setsu swiftly and decisively intercepted her hand, effectively putting the princess on social lockdown. Witnessing the rejection, Manelli's face turned red as she processed the extreme second-hand embarrassment of royal dating. Canaria remained unrepentant, convincing herself that this aggressive behavior was actually for Setsu's ultimate happiness and benefit. Manelli realized her desperation stemmed from wanting to escape her engagement to the creepy old emperor. A flashback revealed that Canaria genuinely liked the crown prince, seeing him as her only way out of the nightmare. Manelli realized with a shock that her understanding of the original story's romance, as an outsider, was completely wrong. Real life hit hard as Setsu announced Manelli was his partner, holding her hand with a level of protection befitting a duke. Canaria flew into a rage, feeling she had been sidelined by someone she considered to be a mere northern commoner. Setsu remained unmoved, prioritizing his prior commitment to Manelli over any royal tantrum or social protocol. Manelli looked up in disbelief, wondering when she had become the center of the Duke's bold romantic declaration. When the princess questioned northern law, Setsu played his ultimate trump card. Here he was the law. Canaria trembled with rage, clutching her dress as she realized her royal status had no effect on the Grand Duke. She demanded that Setsu abandon Manelli immediately, refusing to accept a commoner as a legitimate rival. Canaria accused him of being blinded by beauty, ignoring every tradition the nobility held sacred. As a dark energy began to swirl, the princess announced she would no longer be polite to these ignorant northern fools. Canaria turned and stormed away, leaving a trail of ominous, dark resentment. Setsu watched her leave, noting that her pampered upbringing left her completely unable to choose her words with any discretion. As he contemplated the princess's complete lack of self-control, his eyes glinted with a cold and terrifying light. Manelli, terrified by the shift in atmosphere, called out to Setsu, hoping to calm his rising dark power. Setsu stood shrouded in shadows while Josh watched from a distance, finding the unfolding disaster to be top-tier entertainment. Josh maintained his carefree smile, clearly enjoying the fact that he wasn't the one who had to deal with the angry Duke. The banquet hall had become a tense battlefield, with the main players taking their corners, each with their own secret agenda. Above the chaos, the ornate ceiling glittered, oblivious to the fact that the social hierarchy was crumbling. Setsu escorted Canaria across the hall, maintaining a cold, professional distance while fulfilling his duties as host. From across the room, Canaria glared at Manelli, who was now forced to dine with the meddlesome Admiral. The raging spirit power finally subsided, but the tension between the two pairs remained thicker than the banquet gravy. Seeking a moment of peace, Setsu tried to compose himself before continuing with the evening's formal festivities. A vision of a giant black cobra appeared, representing the all-consuming evil entity that was barely seen in the original story. Setsu was depicted as the host of this power, a man hiding a terrifying secret beneath his perfect military posture. Manelli understood why he hid the spirit, but she found his presence comforting rather than terrifying. Beauty was in the eye of the beholder as she noted Setsu and Canaria now behaving like civilized rulers, the previous tension replaced by professional mutual respect. Manelli wondered if the fire-wielding princess could handle Setsu's dark power, questioning the logic of the supposed fated pairing entirely. Canaria turned away with a melancholy look, perhaps realizing she was no longer the main character in this particular northern tale. The pink-haired Josh suddenly invaded Manelli's personal space, proving that a handsome admiral does not equate to a sense of propriety. He smugly demanded she thank him for his help today, causing Manelli to have a completely justified, wide-eyed social panic attack. Josh leaned in with a smirk while Manelli wondered why her life had become a magnet for high-ranking, pink-haired chaos. Manelli questioned Josh's suspicious kindness, while he played the part of a confused, pink-haired flirt. Standing alone in her borrowed finery, she looked like a princess, but felt like an administrative target. Josh revealed a subtle smirk, clearly planning to turn this simple walk into a full-blown romantic side plot. As they moved, Josh asked about her long experience as an aide, probing for more personal details. He noted that she didn't look like the type for hard labor, continuing his relentless charm and confuse offensive. Manelli's internal alarm bells were ringing, realizing this extra character was paying far too much attention to her. Sitting across from Josh, Manelli let out an internal groan, realizing her quiet administrative life was officially over. Her face went blank as she tried to process the fact that she was somehow on a royal double date. Josh laughed at her discomfort, finding her deer-in-the-headlights expression the most entertaining part of dinner. He dropped the conversational bomb, asking if she truly believed the princess was the Duke's fated romantic partner. Manelli nearly choked on her wine, caught off guard by Josh's sharp insight into her internal logic. She downed her glass, desperate to hide her panic under the general's sharp, teasing gaze. Josh steered the conversation to alcohol tolerance, while Manelli insisted that Northerners could hold their liquor. He continued to tease her, suggesting she was controlling the Duke's drinking habits like a worried wife. Manelli dreamed of a future away from all this drama, perhaps traveling the world or finding peace in alchemy. Josh steered the conversation back into dangerous romantic territory by asking if she had found a man worth marrying. A memory of a gentle, brown-haired man named Lynn surfaced, reminding her of an answer she had yet to give. Overwhelmed by questions, spirits, and suitors, Manelli sighed, wishing she could just make a run for the exit. Josh offered a killer wink, proving that no matter where she ran, his relentless charm would find her. Josh suggested Manelli move to the south, claiming she was too delicate for the northern cold. Smooth move, Admiral. Manelli denied being sensitive to the cold, while Josh sipped his wine, suddenly shifting into a matching tough guy attitude. Manelli felt targeted, wondering why this VIP wasn't enjoying his own party instead of hovering around her. Josh noted that Setsu seemed completely uninterested in the celebration, despite it being held in his honor. Across the table, Setsu and Princess Canaria dined in a frosty silence that could have frozen the wine at the banquet. The Grand Duke maintained his signature brooding stare, looking as if he were calculating the tactical disadvantages of royal small talk. Josh chuckled at the tension, while Manelli remained unconvinced that his constant presence was anything but a romantic trap. A brown-haired man stared at his steak, lost in silent existential dread over a medium-rare mistake. Josh noticed the guest's discomfort and offered medical assistance, apparently worried the steak had claimed a social casualty. The man revealed he was a priest who didn't eat meat. He politely opted for bread rather than have the kitchen intervene. Manelli looked down and apologized, realizing her administrative oversight had served a holy man a very unholy dinner. The priest joked that his lack of a divine aura made it hard to recognize his profession. Manelli, curious about his presence, asked about the churches in the north, hoping to salvage the conversation post-state disaster. The conversation took a sharp turn when Manelli admitted she was an atheist. This prompted the priest to question her lack of faith. Manelli froze, caught off guard by the priest's direct inquiry into her soul while looking extremely confused. A metaphor unfolded as the priest explained that in his unique vision, people looked like a grove of living trees. He described the growth rings left by divine touch, a mystical concept that left stands surrounded by a floral aura. Manelli listened intently to the priest's peculiar botanical take on human spirituality. Josh looked incredibly pleased with himself, while Manelli wondered what exactly he was so proud of during this bizarre moment. Manelli realized that being near the pink-haired Admiral meant dealing with a level of weirdness she was never prepared for. She asked how the priest managed his unique vision, while he continued to gesture like a cryptic life coach. A sharp sound suddenly echoed as Canaria slammed the table, clearly fed up with the bizarre turn the dinner conversation had taken. The princess complained about the inappropriate topics, wondering if bloodshed was a casual social custom in the north. Setsu, unshaken, coldly asked if Canaria was finally ready to pack her bags and return to the capital. He suggested she follow Admiral Passa, subsequently revealing Josh's high-ranking title and leaving the princess looking utterly stunned. Josh was revealed to be the South's legendary Mad Dragon, set against a backdrop of a dramatic warship and churning ocean power. Manelli felt a wave of internal cringe at the Admiral's ridiculously over-the-top military nickname. Josh leaned back, explaining that his pink hair alone was usually enough to make most people tremble in fear. Canaria was visibly intimidated, realizing the man she had been ignoring was a major Southern legend. Josh struck a commanding pose, revealing his duty was to escort the fire-wielding princess using his powerful water spirit. High-pressure water effects filled the hall, effectively turning the formal banquet into a very wet demonstration of spiritual power. Canaria looked genuinely terrified by the close-range water power, her royal composure dissolving like sugar in tea. Manelli watched in awe at the swirling water, realizing she was witnessing a level of magic that wasn't in her script. A small and adorable fish spirit named Aquaria appeared, proving that even the Mad Dragon had a cute side. Manelli was instantly captivated by the floating fish spirit. She asked if she was allowed to touch the spirit, while Josh watched her with an uncharacteristically serious and focused expression. Josh seized the opportunity, placing a hand on her shoulder to declare that Manelli belonged to the South and to him. So much for subtlety. Setsu's hand cut off the Admiral's move, coldly ordering him to take the princess and leave immediately. A stunned Manelli looked up at Setsu as he intervened, putting an end to the Admiral's aggressive recruitment pitch. As maids reset the scene, the first phase of the banquet concluded with a lingering sense of spiritual and social chaos. The priest greeted Manelli politely, his friendly smile belying the strangeness of their prior exchange. Manelli looked startled as glowing petals fell around her, adding another layer of mystery to the already confusing night. A close-up shot revealed a medical needle being prepared, hinting at a technological advancement that seemed out of place. The priest made a cryptic comment about her slender needle before quickly dismissing it as talking to himself. Under the cold moonlight, the priest confronted Josh, who was lounging with his usual carefree and arrogant demeanor. Josh offered a playful wink, maintaining his charming facade, even while discussing the high-stakes game of nobility. The two men discussed Manelli's innocence and charm, finding her to be an absolutely delightful target of interest. While Josh appeared romantic and cheerful, the narration hinted at a darker, more complex nature hidden beneath. A terrifying vision of a skeletal grim Reaper revealed that a dangerous figure was now completely infatuated with the young lady. Josh asked his fish friend for a second opinion on the current royal situation. Kneeling by the spirit, Josh admitted he had sensed the truth ever since he first met her. Manelli glowed in a field of blue flowers, looking like the lead in a high-end shampoo commercial. Josh summoned swirling water, wondering if she was truly here by choice or had simply been socially kidnapped. He warned his companion that dealing with that man's daughter was like playing chess with a very unpredictable toddler. Canaria stared straight ahead with a frosty expression, probably wondering why Northern fashion involved so many heavy floral patterns. The men observed Canaria from a distance as she stood alone, looking like a very fashionable but disgruntled garden ornament. Manelli realized she was having a royal conversation, and her eyes went wide. Social anxiety officially online. Setsu walked away, his brooding military aesthetic playing well with the dramatic lighting of the hallway. Setsu turned his head to call for Manelli, his gaze softening just enough to make the atmosphere legally romantic. As the mood shifted, a sharp clicking sound echoed, making Manelli feel like she'd walked into a romance novel trap. Flowers bloomed around a blushing Manelli, who wondered if someone had turned up the main character sparkle filter. She had a full-blown internal meltdown, questioning whether the Duke was flirting or just being Northern polite. As Setsu revealed his inner puppy dog side, Manelli finally found her voice, giving him the affirmative answer he was looking for. In a close-up filled with will the won't they suspense, she finally used his private name, Setsu. She lamented that the little boy she once protected had somehow evolved into such a distractingly handsome man. A flashback revealed Manelli apologizing for her lack of foresight, clearly not anticipating this level of romantic tension. Setsu gently lifted her chin, proving he was officially exiting the just friends category of life. He teased her with a metaphor about cold water, making Manelli blush so hard she could have set the castle on fire. She covered her face, internally groaning that her embarrassing past was being brought up for the Duke's amusement. He held her hand tightly, reminding her of the future she had once planned for his royal success. A younger Manelli had worked hard to make him a perfect Duke, but she had completely forgotten to include herself in his future. Setsu pointed out the obvious flaw in her plan. If she wasn't in it, what was the point of a frozen kingdom? He kissed her hand, delivering a killer line that made Manelli look like a startled, high-class deer. The Duke demanded exclusive rights to his name, which was basically the aristocratic version of making it official. He revealed a rare, genuine smile, looking far too handsome for a man who lived in a glorified walk-in freezer. Manelli had a peak fangirl moment, covering her face and short-circuiting from all the royal attention. Realizing her favorite character liked her back, she internally screamed. The fanfiction dream was real. While dreaming of wedding bells, she realized her pipsqueak younger self had finally won the romantic lottery. A memory of his father's elitist nonsense surfaced, a narrative reminder that low birth had once been a social crime. Back in the room, Manelli worried about the gossip that would fall on Setsu if he chose. Love over status. Frustrated by the slow progress, she wondered if being more proactive would solve her romantic dilemma. A black snake spirit suddenly popped out, nearly giving Manelli a heart attack and proving that the North's pest control had failed. She recognized the noodle-like intruder from a previous encounter. This snake had some serious stalking skills. A startled yelp was heard as the spirit was suddenly yanked back into the shadows of the room. Setsu stood by the window, blushing, having just had his secret spy snake caught by his crush. He pulled out a jewelry box, indicating he was ready to skip the small talk and go straight to the proposal stage. The Duke smiled down at the velvet box, looking like he was finally ready to stop playing tactical strategist. A diamond ring glittered inside the box. The ultimate sorry, I sent a spirit to spy on you apology gift. Setsu's heart sank when he saw her with a suitcase. Turns out, being a Grand Duke doesn't prevent severe abandonment issues. He insisted his motives weren't sinister, despite being literally surrounded by ominous, swirling purple shadow energy. The Duke claimed his shadow snake was only there out of concern, a classic case of northern overprotectiveness. He covered his face in shame, realizing his attempt to act like a guardian spirit had just come off as being in the creepy pet category. A soft knock echoed in the room, and Manelli caught him mid-existential romantic crisis. She put the pieces together while Setsu broke out in a cold sweat. Nothing kills the mood like getting caught spy snaking. He admitted he was so flustered that he had accidentally recalled the spirit in front of her. Smooth move, Duke. Setsu worried she hadn't figured out what his spirit was. Ironic since it was usually in her room. The original story of him falling for the blonde princess loomed overhead like a dark cloud, threatening to derail their current momentum. Manelli walked through the night, wondering if the confession was romantic or just northern-style bromance. Her self-doubt was interrupted when she literally ran into Josh, who offered a playful oops at her distress. Manelli froze as a familiar, slightly annoying voice interrupted her solo walk through the castle halls. Josh appeared with a refill, proving his Mad Dragon title probably referred to his incredible tolerance for alcohol. Thump, thump. Her heart did gymnastics as she debated whether to accept the Duke's very formal romantic upgrade. Manelli stiffened, realizing that dating her boss involved a massive, socially awkward status gap. She decided logic was for people who didn't have handsome dukes and resolved to grab his hand immediately. A sudden, sharp realization pierced through her romantic daydream, making her look like she had completely forgotten to turn off the stove. The scene shifted as blonde hair caught the light, signaling the arrival of major royal trouble. Manelli spotted Canaria sneaking into a room. The door clicked shut, and inside, Canaria gave a cryptic warning while Setsu questioned why she wasn't afraid. Honestly, her nerve was impressive. Canaria remained smug, betting he would hold back, while Setsu's massive shadow snake rose to test that theory. The princess's fire magic erupted in terror. A defiant Canaria realized the Duke's power was even more terrifying than the rumor suggested. She fumed internally, blaming Manelli for stealing everyone's attention and planning a very childish revenge plot. Josh lurked in the background, casually offering to ignore Canaria's suspicious behavior. Canaria stormed off with her arms crossed while Josh gave a final monster warning. Canaria smiled, her villain checklist apparently going well. Back at the table, Manelli looked thoroughly drunk, having clearly lost her battle with the North's finest aged vintage. Josh began questioning her loyalty to the frozen North, acting like a very handsome recruitment travel agent. Manelli's brain went into error interface mode as her body grew heavy. Manelli 0, Josh 1. Josh planted seeds of doubt, reminding her that Setsu's future family would have no room for a little aid. Heartbroken and drunk, she was contemplating life as a second wife when a somber memory surfaced. The day the former Grand Duke died, saving her mother, deepening her eternal guilt. Seizing the emotional opening, Josh made his move, inviting the vulnerable young lady to escape to the south. Manelli blinked through a drunken haze, trying to process a life without snow and snakes. A sun-drenched beach fantasy appeared, looking like a tropical vacation ad designed to tempt her away. As she drifted off, she mumbled Canaria's name, her internal logic center finally shutting down for the night. Manelli finally passed out face down on the table, leaving her at the mercy of the Admiral's schemes. The narration warned that Josh was a tactical threat who didn't care about the means to his ends. A mysterious voice questioned if the Duke truly loved her, casting a shadow over the snowy palace balcony. Manelli mumbled incoherently in her sleep, her subconscious still fighting the urge to leave the North. She reflected one last time on her loyalty, refusing to leave despite the princess's interference with Setsu. Josh reached out to stroke her hair, noting that her stubbornness was as irritating as ever. He whispered a promise of a world without jealousy, but was cut off by a very displeased and authoritative shout. The head of security, Lin, joined the conversation, looking like he was about to file a very violent report. The atmosphere turned sharp as the guard stepped forward, his cape billowing with a "not on my watch" energy. Lin introduced himself with cold professionalism, demanding an explanation for the Admiral's suspicious tableside manner. Josh, unfazed, claimed he was just listening to a drunk lady's ramblings. The classic "I didn't do anything" defense. The Admiral offered to escort her home, which sounded about as trustworthy as a wolf offering to take a sheep for a walk. Lin immediately shut him down, ordering the pink-haired flirt to step aside and leave the lady to him. Josh teased the guard about his obvious feelings, while Lin swore on his honor to remain professional. A tense standoff unfolded over the sleeping Manelli between the playful Admiral and the stern guard. Realizing he'd been intercepted by castle security, Josh finally retreated with a casual wave and a sigh. Lin gently tried to wake her, looking far more concerned than a strictly professional head of security should. A gentle hand brushed her face as he admitted she looked beautiful tonight, almost otherworldly. He remembered how she glowed in her noble gown, a sight that had clearly done permanent damage to his composure. The cold moon hung overhead, a witness to the quiet, complicated emotions brewing within the castle's frozen walls. Lin carried the unconscious Manelli away, passing right by a silent, brooding Setsu who was watching everything. Setsu stood in the hallway, looking like he was trying to win a gold medal in the brooding Olympics. Lin arrived with the sleeping Manelli, holding her like a very delicate pink package while offering a formal greeting. The Duke inquired about her condition, and Lin explained that the lady had simply opted for an emergency nap on the terrace. Lin admitted he was moving her and playfully suggested that Setsu's romantic intensity was the source of her fatigue. With a quiet, professional acknowledgement, Lin stepped aside, his stoic expression hiding whatever disappointment he might have felt. Setsu took over the heavy lifting, holding the unconscious Manelli in his arms with a look far too gentle for a duke.